lying on the stretcher. My white $200 dress was torn and stained with blood. While the paramedic kept asking who hit me, I gasped that it was my stepmother, all over a simple dress. They did not know that hours ago. My family was plotting to force me to surrender the $7 million my grandfather left me. Tonight's beating was not about the fabric. It was because, for the first time, I dared to choose myself. My name is Sabrina Erickson, and the first thing I knew for certain was that the ceiling of the ambulance was a dull, textured gray, spinning in slow, nauseating circles. Red and blue lights strobed against the metal walls, washing over my skin in a rhythmic, terrifying disco that felt too much like the party I had just left. But unlike the party, there was no jazz music here, no clinking of crystal champagne flutes, and no polite laughter masking cruel intentions. There was only the mechanical hum of the engine, the rattle of the stretcher, and the wet, jagged sound of my own breathing. A heavy, coppery taste filled my mouth. It took me a moment to realize it was blood. My head throbbed with a violence that made my vision swim, a pulse of agony radiating from my temple where the skin had split. I tried to lift a hand to touch it, to see how bad the damage was, but a firm, gloved hand gently pushed me back down. "Stay with me, Sabrina," a voice said. It was deep, calm, and professional. "I need you to keep your head still. We are stabilizing your neck just to be safe." I blinked, trying to focus on the face hovering above me. It was a paramedic, a man with kind eyes and a jaw set in grim determination. He was wiping something away from my cheek. Blood, or maybe the expensive shrimp cocktail sauce that had splattered onto me when I fell. The smell of antiseptic wipes was sharp and stinging, cutting through the other scent clinging to me. The cloying, floral heaviness of Gabrielle's signature perfume. Chanel No. 5 and rust. That was the smell of my humiliation. "Can you tell me what day it is?" the paramedic asked, shining a penlight into my eyes. The beam felt like a needle piercing my brain. "Saturday," I whispered. My voice sounded wrecked, like gravel grinding in a mixer. "It is Saturday, October 14th. "Good, that is good," he said, marking something on a clipboard. "Now, Sabrina, I need to ask you again. The police officer at the scene said you were found unconscious near the buffet table. There is significant bruising on your arms and a laceration on your forehead that does not look accidental. Who did this to you?" I closed my eyes. The darkness behind my eyelids was safer, but it was not empty. In the dark, I could still see her face. The instinct to lie was automatic. It was a reflex honed over 20 years of survival in the Erickson household. Protect the image. Protect the family name. Don't be dramatic. Don't make a scene. I could hear my father's voice, smooth and warning, telling me that private matters stayed private. I could feel the phantom weight of Gabrielle's hand on my shoulder, her nails digging in just enough to hurt while she smiled at the neighbors. If I told the truth now, the carefully constructed glass house we lived in would shatter. And for so long, I had been convinced that it was my job to hold up the walls. "I fell," I started to say. The lie tasted like ash. The paramedic stopped writing. He leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a murmur that felt dangerously intimate in the chaos of the siren's wail. "Ma'am, I have been doing this for 15 years. I know what a fall looks like, and I know what defensive wounds look like. You have scratches on your forearms where you tried to block a hit. Your dress is torn at the shoulder strap with force. This was not a fall." I looked down at myself. My beautiful white dress. I had bought it with my own money. $200 saved from double shifts at the coffee shop. It was a simple slip dress, elegant and understated. The kind of thing a woman wears when she wants to feel like herself. Now, the left strap was ripped completely off, leaving the silk hanging sadly against my chest. The bodice was stained dark red. It looked like a war flag that had been trampled in the mud. The anger hit me then, sudden and hot, burning through the fog of the concussion. It wasn't the pain that broke me. It was the dress. It was the fact that for once, I had bought something just for me. Something that wasn't a hand-me-down or a practical uniform for serving my stepbrother. And she had destroyed it simply because I looked good in it. "My stepmother," I choked out. The words felt like vomiting up a stone. She did this. The paramedic paused, his pen hovering. Your stepmother hit you? Yes, I said, the word coming out stronger this time. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, hot and stinging. She beat me because of a dress, a $200 dress. The air in the ambulance seemed to shift. The professional detachment in the paramedic's eyes evaporated, replaced by a steely protective hardness. He exchanged a look with his partner driving up front. He didn't say anything patronizing. He didn't ask if I was sure. He simply nodded, underlined something on his chart with a sharp, definitive stroke, and placed a hand gently on my uninjured shoulder. Okay, he said. We are going to take care of you. You are safe now. Safe. The word sounded foreign. I hadn't been safe in that house since I was 10 years old. The rhythm of the sirens seemed to sync with my heartbeat, dragging me backward, pulling me away from the safety of the ambulance and back into the golden, glittering nightmare of 2 hours ago. The flashback hit me with the force of a physical blow. The banquet hall was suffocatingly warm. It was technically our living room, but living room was too humble a word for the cavernous space Mark and Gabrielle Erickson called home. It was a showroom, filled with rented crystal chandeliers, hired waitstaff carrying silver trays, and the hum of polite conversation from Denver's elite. We were celebrating Jordan's 23rd birthday. My stepbrother, the golden boy, the future CEO of nothing, yet somehow the heir to everything. I had spent the last 3 days organizing the catering, confirming the guest list, and ensuring the ice sculptures didn't melt, all while Gabrielle critiqued my efficiency. But tonight, I had done something different. Tonight, I hadn't worn the black server-style outfit Gabrielle usually suggested I wear to blend in. I had worn the white dress. I was standing near the dessert station, refilling a tray of macarons, when I felt the room go quiet. Or maybe it was just my hearing that tuned out everything else as I saw Gabrielle marching toward me across the polished marble floor. She looked immaculate in emerald green silk, her diamonds catching the light, but her face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. She didn't care that the mayor's wife was 10 feet away. She didn't care that my father was toasting Jordan by the fireplace. She only saw me. She saw me looking like a daughter of the house, not a servant. She saw me looking happy. "What do you think you are doing?" she hissed, grabbing my arm. Her nails were manicured into sharp talons. "I am enjoying the party, Gabrielle," I said, trying to pull away. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "It is Jordan's birthday." "You look like a whore," she spat, her voice rising. "Wearing white? Trying to upstage him? Trying to make this about you?" "It is just a dress," I said, my voice trembling. "I bought it myself. It cost $200. It is not even expensive." That was the wrong thing to say. Mentioning money, mentioning my money, money she couldn't control, was the spark that lit the fuse. "You selfish little brat," she shrieked. Before I could react, she lunged. She didn't just grab me, she attacked the fabric itself. Her hand hooked into the delicate spaghetti strap of my left shoulder, and she yanked with a strength fueled by years of jealousy. The sound of the silk tearing was loud, a sharp rip that cut through the ambient jazz. I stumbled back, clutching the front of my dress to cover myself. "Stop it! You are crazy!" "I am the only one keeping this family together," she screamed. She slapped me then. It wasn't a theatrical movie slap. It was a hard, open-palmed strike that connected with my ear and jaw, ringing my skull like a bell. The force of it threw me off balance. My heels slipped on the polished floor. I flailed, trying to grab the edge of the long buffet table, but I missed the wood and caught the tablecloth instead. I went down hard. My temple cracked against the sharp corner of the heavy oak table. The world exploded into white light, and then the cascade. Heavy porcelain platters, crystal bowls of punch, and silver cutlery came crashing down on top of me. The crash was deafening, a symphony of destruction. Warm punch soaked my hair. Shrimp cocktail sauce splattered across my white dress like a gruesome mimicry of blood. I lay there on the floor, stunned, unable to move. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard the collective gasp of 50 guests. I heard a glass shatter somewhere in the distance. And I heard Gabrielle's voice, high and frantic, instantly pivoting to victimhood. "She is drunk! Oh my God! Sabrina, how could you? Look what you have done to Jordan's party!" I looked up, vision blurring, and saw my father. Mark Erickson stood frozen by the fireplace, his glass raised. He looked at me, bleeding, humiliated, covered in food, and then he looked at the guests. He didn't rush to help me. He looked embarrassed. That was the last thing I saw before the darkness took me. The look of annoyance on my father's face because I had inconvenienced him by getting beaten unconscious. Beep, beep, beep. The rhythmic monitor brought me back to the present. The ambulance had stopped moving. The back doors flew open, admitting a rush of cool night air and the frantic energy of the emergency room bay. Female, 23, blunt force trauma to the head, possible concussion, lacerations to the face and arms. The paramedic recited rapidly as they unloaded my stretcher. The wheels hit the pavement with a jolt that sent a fresh spike of pain through my skull. I stared up at the fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor as they wheeled me in. They were brighter than the chandeliers at the party, harsh and unforgiving. A nurse moved alongside the stretcher, cutting the ruined fabric of my dress away to check for other injuries. I wanted to tell her to stop, to save it, but I knew it was gone. The dress was dead. The girl who bought it, hoping for a magical night, was dead too. They transferred me onto a hospital bed in a curtained bay. The activity slowed down once they determined I wasn't dying immediately. A nurse with kind eyes and tired shoulders began cleaning the cut on my forehead. "I am going to put a wristband on you, honey," she said softly. She snapped the plastic band around my wrist. I lifted my arm to look at it. Sabrina Erickson, DOB 0512-2001. I stared at the plastic band. It was so simple. Just my name. Not the Erickson girl, not the help, not the problem, just me. Sabrina. For the first time in years, I felt like I existed as a singular entity. I was a patient. I was a person with injuries that were being documented. I was real. The nurse finished cleaning the wound and stepped back, wiping her hands. She looked at me, really looked at me, with a gaze that stripped away the pretense. "The paramedics told us what you said in the ambulance," she said. Her voice was low, keeping the conversation private from the busy hallway. "About who did this?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes." "Okay." She picked up a clipboard. "I need to ask you a standard question. We ask everyone in this situation, do you have a safe place to go tonight? Somewhere other than home?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and terrifying. Do I have a safe place? I opened my mouth to answer, but the words caught in my throat. I thought of my bedroom with the lock that didn't work, because Jordan had kicked it in 3 years ago and my father never fixed it. I thought of the way Gabrielle monitored my bank account, my phone, my mail. I thought of the way the neighbors always believed her charming smiles over my silence. I started, and then I stopped. Tears welled up again, hot and fast. I shook my head. "I don't know." The nurse nodded understandingly. "That is okay. We have a social worker on call. We can help you figure that out. But you are not going back there tonight unless you want to. Do you understand? You have a choice." A choice. The concept was dizzying. For 10 years, since my mother died and Gabrielle moved in, my choices had been whittled away until they were like dust. Choose to smile or be punished. Choose to work or be guilty. Choose to stay silent or be mocked. But lying there on the crisp, starched sheets, smelling of iodine and floor wax, I felt something shift deep inside my chest. It was a cold, hard sensation. It wasn't fear anymore. It was clarity. They had nearly killed me. Over a dress. Over $200. And they didn't know, they couldn't possibly know, about the letter I had hidden in the lining of my old winter coat back at the house. The letter from the law firm of Henderson and Associates. They didn't know about the $7 million. My grandfather, Thomas Erickson, had seen everything. He had watched Gabrielle's manipulation and my father's cowardice, and he had left me the weapon to burn it all down. But the clause in the trust was specific. I could only access the funds immediately if I could prove duress or unsafe living conditions. I looked at the nurse. I looked at the bloody dress in the biohazard bin. I touched the bandage on my forehead. Proof. This wasn't a tragedy. This was the key. I am not going back, I whispered. The voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded older. It sounded dangerous. I am never going back. The nurse squeezed my hand. Good for you, honey. Rest now. The doctor will be in soon. She pulled the curtain closed, leaving me in the semi-private dimness. The sounds of the ER, a baby crying, a gurney rattling, a doctor calling for epinephrine, faded into the background. I lay back against the pillow and stared at the ceiling tiles. My head hurt, my body ached, and my heart was broken. But as I traced the letters of my name on the wristband, I made a vow to the girl I used to be. If I survive this night, I told myself, the thought forming like steel hardening in fire, I will never be their shadow again. They wanted to break me. Instead, they just handed me the hammer. I closed my eyes and waited for the police. I was ready to tell my story. And this time, I wasn't going to leave out a single detail. To understand how I ended up bleeding on a stretcher because of a dress, you have to understand the house where I grew up. It was a sprawling, 2-story colonial in one of those manicured suburbs just outside of Denver. The kind of place where the grass was not just green but a specific, regulation shade of emerald. We had a 3-car garage, a heated driveway for the winter snows, and a front door made of solid mahogany that cost more than most people's cars. From the street, the Erickson residence looked like the American dream wrapped in a bow. But inside, the air was always 10 degrees colder than the thermostat read. I was 10 years old when the silence truly settled in. My mother had passed away the year before, leaving behind a void that my father, Mark Erickson, did not know how to fill with love. So he tried to fill it with perfection. My father was a man who lived for the Christmas card photo. He was a corporate executive who treated fatherhood like a middle management position he was trying to delegate. He did not want a daughter who cried or needed hugs. He wanted a daughter who looked presentable in a velvet headband and got straight A's so he could brag about me at the country club. For 2 years, it was just the two of us existing in that big, echoing house. I learned to be quiet. I learned that if I made my own peanut butter toast and watched cartoons with the volume low, my father would look at me with a vague sort of approval, the way one looks at a low-maintenance houseplant. Then, when I was 12, the front door opened, and Gabrielle walked in. She was not the wicked stepmother of fairy tales, with a wart on her nose and a cackle. That would have been easier to fight. Gabrielle was beautiful. She was sharp angles and expensive silk, with a smile that could light up a room and eyes that cataloged the cost of everything in it. She was a divorcee from Chicago with a background in event planning, and she looked at our quiet, dusty lives, not with affection, but with the critical eye of a contractor looking at a fixer-upper. She brought 2 things with her. The first was noise, dinner parties, clinking wine glasses, the rustle of shopping bags. The second was Jordan. Jordan was her son, my new stepbrother. He was 10 months younger than me, a loud, energetic boy with messy hair and a smile that got him out of trouble before he even got into it. From the moment they moved their boxes into the primary suite and the second largest bedroom, the gravity of the house shifted. Jordan became the sun, and the rest of us were just planets hoping to catch a bit of his warmth. We are going to be a real family now. Sabrina. My father told me the night before the wedding. He looked relieved, like he had finally hired the right staff to manage his domestic life. Gabrielle is going to make this house a home again. He was right, but not in the way he thought. Gabrielle did make it a home. She just made it her home. The grooming started so subtly that I did not even notice my role was changing until I was already trapped in it. It began with compliments. Gabrielle would smooth my hair back before a dinner party, her fingers cool and smelling of lavender lotion, and say, "Sabrina, You are so much more mature than Jordan. He is such a wild thing. But you are my little adult. At 12, that felt like a medal of honor. I wanted to be the little adult. I wanted to be useful. Since you are so grown up, she would say, handing me a stack of linen napkins, why don't you fold these for the table settings? I need to help Jordan with his tie. You know how he gets when he's frustrated. So I folded the napkins, then I arranged the silverware, then I was the one refilling the water glasses for the guests because Gabrielle was too busy charming my father's boss, and Jordan was busy playing video games in the den with the other kids. By the time I was 14, the pattern was set in stone. I remember one Saturday in particular. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the aspen trees in the mountains turn that brilliant, aching gold. I had been begging my father for weeks to let me join the school's art club. There was a weekend retreat up in Boulder, a painting workshop for students who showed promise. It cost $250. I brought the permission slip to the kitchen island, where Gabrielle was reviewing the catering invoices for her upcoming Halloween gala. My father was reading the Wall Street Journal, sipping the espresso I had made for him. "Dad," I said, sliding the paper across the granite. "The art retreat is next weekend. Mrs. Miller said I have a real shot at the state competition if I go." My father lowered the paper, looking at the slip with a frown. "Art? Is that practical, Sabrina?" "It is just a weekend," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "And I really want to go." Gabrielle looked up. She didn't frown. She smiled. That sad, sympathetic smile she used when she was about to crush something. "Oh, honey, next weekend?" "Yes," I said, my stomach tightening. "That is the weekend of Jordan's soccer tournament in Colorado Springs," she said softly. "Mark, you remember? We promised him we would all go. He is the starting forward this season." "I don't play soccer," I said. "I would just be sitting on the bleachers." "But we are a family," Gabrielle said, reaching out to cover my hand with hers. Her skin was soft, but her grip was firm. "Jordan needs his cheering section. He looks up to you. Sabrina, if you aren't there, he will think you don't care about his success, and you know how sensitive he is." I looked at my father. I wanted him to say that I mattered too. I wanted him to say that my painting was just as important as Jordan kicking a ball into a net. Mark sighed, checking his watch. "Gabrielle is right. Sabby, we can't split the family up on a weekend. Plus, $250 for a painting trip? That seems excessive for a hobby. Maybe next year." He went back to his paper. The decision was made. I didn't go to Boulder. Instead, I spent the weekend in the freezing wind on a metal bleacher in Colorado Springs, holding a thermos of hot chocolate that I had prepared for everyone, cheering for Jordan every time he touched the ball. When he scored a goal, my father leaped to his feet, high-fiving the other dads, beaming with a pride I had never seen directed at me. Gabrielle squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "See, aren't you glad you came? He couldn't have done it without us." I nodded, feeling a cold, hard knot forming in my chest. It wasn't hatred. Not yet. It was the realization that in the economy of our family, Jordan was the asset, and I was the overhead cost. The neighbors saw it, too, though they interpreted it through the lens Gabrielle provided. When we hosted the neighborhood barbecues, events where I spent 4 hours marinating chicken and chopping vegetables while Jordan played cornhole with the guests, Mrs. Henderson next door would lean over the fence. "Jordan is going to be a CEO one day, just like Mark," she would say, watching him laugh loudly with a group of friends. Then she would turn to me, wiping sweat from my forehead as I carried a heavy tray of dirty dishes. "And you, Sabrina, you are such a helpful little thing, so pleasant. You will make someone a wonderful wife someday." A wife, a helper, a background character. The disparity became undeniable when the birthdays rolled around. Jordan's birthdays were festivals. For his 16th, my father rented out the local arcade and bar, bought him a brand new gaming setup that cost $3,000, and invited half the junior class. There was a DJ. There was a custom cake shaped like a controller. My 16th birthday, which came 3 months later, was a Tuesday. I came downstairs to find a card on the counter and a wrapped box. My heart gave a little jump. Maybe. I thought, maybe this year they saw me. I opened the box. Inside was a high-end, heavy-duty vacuum cleaner. "Since you are getting ready for college in a couple of years," Gabrielle said, sipping her morning smoothie, "we thought it would be practical. That brand lasts forever. It is an investment in your future." I stared at the vacuum. It was gray and utilitarian. It was a tool for cleaning up other people's messes. "Thank you," I said. The words tasted like bile. "And we are going to dinner at that Italian place you like," my father added, checking his phone. "But we have to make it an early one, around 5:30. Jordan has a tutoring session for the SATs at 7, and we can't miss that. We need to get his scores up if he wants to get into business school." So we ate lukewarm pasta at 5:30 in the afternoon in an empty restaurant. And the entire conversation revolved around Jordan's practice test scores. I blew out the 16 candles on a grocery store cupcake while they checked the time. By the time I was 17, I had perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight. I stopped asking for things. I stopped showing them my report cards, even though they were straight A's, because Gabrielle would only say, "That is nice, dear," before launching into a 20-minute monologue about how Jordan's C+ in history was actually a sign of his creative thinking. I became the ghost of the Erickson house. I knew which floorboards creaked. I knew how to walk through the hallway without disturbing the air. I knew that my father loved the idea of having a daughter, someone to look pretty in photos and pour wine for his clients. But he didn't actually like me. He liked the version of me that Gabrielle had curated, the silent, efficient, grateful girl who didn't take up space. But the moment that broke something permanent inside me happened the summer before I turned 18. It was the 4th of July. Gabrielle had decided to host the event of the season. We had nearly 100 people in the backyard. There were fairy lights strung through the oak trees, a live band playing soft rock, and a caterer managing the main food. But Gabrielle had fired the cleaning crew that morning in a fit of pique over a smudge on a window, so the cleanup fell to me. It was 10 o'clock at night. The party was in full swing. Through the large bay window above the kitchen sink, I could see the entire backyard bathed in golden light. My father was holding a glass of scotch, laughing at something the neighbor said, his arm draped casually around Gabrielle's waist. She looked radiant, throwing her head back in laughter, playing the perfect hostess. Jordan was in the center of a group of girls, holding a sparkler, writing his name in the air while they squealed and clapped. They looked like a magazine ad. They looked happy. They looked complete. And I was standing on the other side of the glass, elbow deep in greasy dishwater, scrubbing the roasting pans that the caterers had left behind because Gabrielle said it cost extra for them to clean the heavy equipment. The noise of the party was muffled by the double-paned glass, turning their laughter into a silent movie. I watched them toasting. I watched Jordan hug my father. I watched Gabrielle kiss my father's cheek. I looked down at my hands. They were red and wrinkled from the hot water and the harsh soap. My back ached from standing in heels for 6 hours serving appetizers before I was relegated to the sink. I realized then that I wasn't part of the family portrait. I was the frame. I was the structure that held them up, the invisible labor that made their leisure possible. If I walked out that door and joined them, the spell would break. Someone would have to hand me a drink. Someone would have to ask me how I was. And that would interrupt the flow of the Jordan and Gabrielle show. A single tear rolled down my cheek and splashed into the soapy water. I didn't wipe it away. I just watched the ripples distort the reflection of the kitchen lights. "Sabrina!" Gabrielle's voice came from the patio door. She poked her head in, her smile tight and impatient. "We are running low on ice for the coolers. Can you run down to the gas station and grab 3 or 4 bags? Jordan wants to make margaritas for his friends, and we can't have warm drinks." She didn't ask if I was tired. She didn't notice I'd been washing dishes for 2 hours. She just needed ice for her son. I looked at her. For a second, I thought about saying no. I thought about throwing the scrubbing brush on the floor and screaming, but the conditioning was too deep. The fear of disrupting the peace was too ingrained. "Sure," I said. "I will go right now." "Thanks, sweetie," she said, already turning back to the party. "You are a lifesaver, taking one for the team, as always." I dried my hands on a towel and walked out to my old, beat-up Honda Civic, the car I bought with my own money because Jordan was driving the SUV my father leased for him. As I backed out of the driveway, I looked at the house one last time. The windows glowed with warmth, but I knew the truth. It wasn't a home, it was a stage, and I was done auditioning for a part I was never going to get. That night, driving to the gas station to buy ice for a party I wasn't really invited to, I started keeping a mental ledger. I didn't know yet about the money my grandfather would leave me. I didn't know about the $7 million. But I knew that a debt was accumulating. Every dish I washed, every dream I swallowed, every time I stepped back so Jordan could shine, it was all going into a balance sheet in my head. And one day, I promised myself as I hauled the freezing bags of ice into the trunk, I was going to come to collect. The years between 18 and 21 were a blur of steam wands, burnt milk, and the crushing weight of expectations that were never mine to carry. While my friends from high school were packing their bags for state universities, posting photos of dorm rooms and tailgate parties, I was putting on a green apron and learning how to calibrate an espresso machine at 6 in the morning. I stayed home. That was the agreement. I would attend the local community college to save money, and in exchange, I would continue to live in the house. On the surface, it sounded practical. It sounded like the sensible choice for a girl who was grounded and responsible. Gabrielle spun this narrative into gold for her social circle. I remember coming home from a 10-hour shift, smelling like stale coffee grounds and syrup, to find her hosting a book club in the living room. "Oh, Sabrina is just so independent," she told a woman in a Chanel blazer, gesturing to me as I tried to sneak up the stairs. We offered to send her to Boulder or even out of state, but she insisted on paying her own way. She really values the work ethic. We are just so proud of her grit. The women nodded, looking at me with a mixture of pity and admiration. "Good for you, dear," one of them said. "Character building." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that there had been no offer to send me to Boulder. There had been a conversation at the kitchen table where my father looked at his spreadsheets and said that with the market being volatile, they needed to prioritize Jordan's tuition at the private business college downtown. He had said that since I was smart enough to figure things out, I could handle community college on my own. But I didn't scream. I smiled, said thank you, and went to my room to count the tips in my jar. My life became a cycle of earning and losing. I was making decent money for a student. I was a good barista, efficient and friendly, and I picked up every overtime shift I could get. I had a goal. I wanted to save enough for a deposit on an apartment downtown. I wanted a key that didn't belong to Mark or Gabrielle Erickson. But every time the number in my bank account hit a certain threshold, the emergencies began. It started small. 2 months after I started working, Gabrielle came into my room while I was studying for a biology midterm. She sat on the edge of my bed, looking unusually frazzled. "Sabrina, honey, I hate to ask this," she started, twisting her diamond ring, "but do you have any cash on you? The landscaper is here, and I completely forgot to go to the bank, and your father is in a meeting and not answering his phone. I just need $200 to pay him so he doesn't leave. I will pay you back as soon as Mark gets home." It seemed harmless. I had the money. I gave it to her. She never paid me back. When I brought it up a week later, she laughed it off. "Oh, Sabby, don't be petty. I bought groceries for the whole house yesterday, and that was $300. Let's just call it even, okay? We are a family. We share the load." That phrase, "we share the load," became the mantra of my exploitation. By the time I was 19, the requests had morphed from small favors into systemic extraction. It wasn't stealing in the legal sense. They never took my wallet. They took my conscience. There was the time Jordan's car needed a new transmission. He was driving the SUV my father leased for him, and he had been rough on it. The repair bill was $1,200. My father sat me down in his study. "Sabrina, "We are a little liquid poor this month because of the investments I moved around," he said, looking at me with that serious, executive face. "I know you have been saving up from the coffee shop. We need to borrow $1,200 to get Jordan's car running. He needs it to get to his internship. That is my tuition money for next semester." "Dad," I said, my voice shaking, "I have been saving that for 4 months." "I know," he said, nodding gravely. "And I appreciate that. But Jordan can't lose this internship. It is crucial for his resume. If he doesn't have a car, he can't go. Do you want your brother to fail because you wanted to hold on to some cash? We will reimburse you before tuition is due." I gave them the money. When tuition came due, they didn't have it. I had to take fewer classes that semester and pick up extra shifts to pay the difference. That was when I bought the notebook. It was a small black ledger that I hid under the loose floorboard in the back of my closet, the one place Jordan hadn't destroyed yet. I started writing it all down. At first, I did it just to keep track, thinking that one day they would actually pay me back. October 3rd, $400 for Jordan's fraternity dues. Gabrielle said it was a networking investment. November 12th, $150 for professional detailing on Dad's car before a client meeting. December 5th, $600 for the emergency plumbing bill that turned out to be a new fixture for the guest bathroom. The list grew, and as the ink filled the pages, the purpose of the notebook changed. It stopped being a record of loans and started being a record of reality. It was the only thing that proved I wasn't crazy. When Gabrielle would tell me I was being dramatic, or that I lived here rent-free, I would look at the numbers. I was paying rent. I was paying more than rent. I was subsidizing their lifestyle. Jordan was the primary beneficiary, though he was blissfully unaware. He walked through life with the confidence of someone who has never seen a bill he couldn't pass to someone else. He would come into the kitchen wearing a new designer watch or carrying a limited edition gym bag, and I would look at it and know exactly how many lattes I had to make to pay for the credit card bill Gabrielle was secretly struggling to cover. There was one incident that burned itself into my memory when I was 20. I had always wanted to write, in the rare quiet moments between work and school. I filled legal pads with stories. There was a summer writing workshop in Santa Fe that I had dreamed of attending. It was a week long, and it cost $800. I had scrimped and saved, hiding cash in a hollowed-out textbook so Gabrielle wouldn't see the balance in my account. I finally had the money. I was going to register on a Tuesday. On Monday night, Gabrielle came home in tears. She had been crying, her mascara running down her face. Jordan had gotten into a little trouble, she said. A little trouble turned out to be a minor fender bender in a parking lot. He had hit a parked car and panicked, driving away before leaving a note. The owner of the other car had found him on camera and was threatening to go to the police unless they paid for the damages immediately and in cash. "It is $2,000, Gabrielle sobbed. "If the police get involved, it goes on his record. He will lose his insurance. It could affect his business school applications. Mark will kill him if he finds out." She turned to me. She knew. Somehow. She always knew when I had money. Maybe she checked my room. Maybe she just smelled the optimism on me. "Sabrina, I know you have some savings," she said, grabbing my hands. Her palms were clammy. "Please, I can come up with $1,200, but I need another $800. You have to help him. He is your brother." "I can't," I said, stepping back. "That is for my writing workshop. I have been saving for a year." Her face changed instantly. The tears stopped, replaced by a cold, hard look of disappointment. "A writing workshop?" she repeated, making the words sound ridiculous. "You are going to let your brother get a criminal record so you can go sit in a circle and read poems? I didn't think you were that selfish. Sabrina, after everything we have done for you, we gave you a home when your mother died. We have fed you, clothed you, and now, when the family is in crisis, you want to go on a vacation?" Then my father walked in. He didn't know the full story, only that Jordan was in trouble and I was saying no. "Sabrina," he said, his voice booming with authority, "this family does not abandon each other. If you have the means to solve this problem and you choose not to, you are making a statement about your loyalty. Is that the statement you want to make? I looked at them. The united front. The wall of guilt. I went to my room. I took the cash out of the hollowed-out textbook. I handed it to Gabrielle. She hugged me, whispering that I was a good sister, but her eyes were already scanning the room, checking if there was anything else she could use. I didn't go to Santa Fe. I spent that week working double shifts. Jordan got the car fixed. He never thanked me. He didn't even know I had paid. A week later, he laughed at dinner about how he handled the situation with the other driver, bragging about his negotiation skills. I sat there, cutting my chicken, and felt something inside me turning into stone. That night, I stayed up late researching on my laptop. I typed in phrases like family taking money and guilt tripping for cash. The search results gave me a term I had never heard before: financial abuse. I read the articles: controlling a victim's ability to acquire, use, and maintain economic resources, sabotaging employment or educational opportunities, stealing or coercing money under the guise of family obligation. It was like reading a biography of my last 3 years. I wasn't just a helpful daughter, I was a resource. I was a battery that they plugged into whenever their own power ran low. They didn't want me to leave because if I left, the extra income stream dried up. They needed me to be successful enough to have money, but not successful enough to escape. I was the invisible scaffold holding up the crumbling facade of the Erickson family success. The realization didn't bring me peace, but it gave me a framework. I stopped looking at them as family members who were just bad with money or stressed. I saw them as predators. Gabrielle was the architect, designing the traps. Mark was the enforcer, ensuring I stayed in them. And Jordan was the golden calf they were feeding with my future. I changed my strategy. I stopped hiding cash in the house. I opened a new bank account at a completely different bank, one that didn't send paper statements to the house. I chose online-only options. I told them my hours at the coffee shop had been cut, even though I was working more than ever. I started acting the part they wanted. When I came home, I complained about being broke. I wore my oldest clothes. I made a show of counting coins for gas money. "Poor thing," Gabrielle would say, eyeing my scuffed sneakers. "Maybe you should pick up some babysitting gigs. We have the gala coming up, and I will need a new dress." I gritted my teeth and saved. $5 here, $20 there. I was building a nest egg, a secret freedom fund. I had a target: $3,000, enough for a deposit, first month's rent, and a moving truck. I got close. I got to $2,800. I was looking at apartment listings on my phone during my breaks, fantasizing about a studio apartment with a door that locked and a fridge that contained food only I would eat. Then came the tax error. I was 21. It was tax season. My father, who insisted on using his accountant for the family taxes to keep things simple, called me into his office. "Sabrina, there has been a complication," he said. He didn't look at me. He looked at a file on his desk. "Because of the way you are claimed as a dependent and your income bracket, it seems we owe a significant amount to the IRS this year. The accountant made a filing error last year, and the penalties are steep." "How much?" I asked, my blood running cold. "Your share of the penalty, based on your income contribution to the household, is about $2,500, he said. "That is impossible," I said. "I make minimum wage plus tips. I don't owe that much in taxes." "It is complicated. Sabrina, it has to do with the household aggregate. Look, I can't have the IRS auditing me. It would ruin my reputation at the firm. I need you to cover your portion, now." I stared at him. I knew, deep down, that this was a lie. Or if it wasn't a lie, it was a manipulation of numbers to offload his debt onto me. But he was my father. He was a corporate executive, and I was just a barista. Who would the IRS believe? "I don't have it," I lied. "Don't lie to me," he snapped. It was the first time he raised his voice in a long time. "I saw the mail from that new bank you signed up with. I know you have an account there. Do not make me treat you like a stranger. Sabrina, pay your share." They had found the mail. I had missed one envelope. I felt the trap snap shut. If I refused, he could kick me out right then. I would be homeless with no credit history, no cosigner, and a father actively working against me. I wrote the check. My hand shook so hard the signature was barely legible. $2,500, gone. My freedom fund was back to $300. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I felt a cold, hollow space in my chest where my hope used to be. I realized then that I couldn't just save my way out. They would always find a way to drain the tank. As long as I was in this house, I was a hostage. I needed something bigger. I needed a miracle. I didn't know it then, but the miracle was already waiting for me in a lawyer's office downtown, sitting in a file marked Thomas Erickson Trust. But for now, I was 21, broke, exhausted, and listening to Jordan laugh in the next room as he played video games on a console I had effectively paid for. I pulled out my black notebook. I turned to a fresh page. I wrote down the date and the amount. $2,500, the IRS lie. Then I underlined it twice. The tip of the pen tore through the paper. One day, I thought, one day, the balance will be due. To understand the magnitude of the storm that was about to break, you have to understand Thomas Erickson. My grandfather was the only person in the Erickson bloodline who had a spine made of something other than corporate ambition or social climbing. He was a man who smelled of pipe tobacco, old leather, and the kind of honest sweat that comes from building something with your own hands, while my father, Mark, was obsessed with the appearance of wealth. Thomas was obsessed with the substance of character. He was the only one who ever really saw me. When I was a teenager, during those long, suffocating weekends when Gabrielle was hosting her elaborate garden parties, and I was relegated to the kitchen to chop vegetables, I would sneak away to the nursing home where Thomas lived. It was my sanctuary. He did not care about my grades, or whether my hair was frizzy, or if I had properly set the table for 12. He would sit in his armchair by the window, looking out at the flatirons, and he would ask me the one question nobody else ever did. "What do you want, Brina?" he would rasp, his voice rough like sandpaper. "Not what your father wants, not what that woman wants. What do you want?" I would read to him for hours. We read Hemingway, Steinbeck, and history books about the erratic nature of the stock market. He told me stories about how he made his first million, not by stepping on people, but by listening to them. He told me that money was a tool, like a hammer. You could use it to build a house, or you could use it to break someone's knees. It all depended on whose hand was holding the handle. "Be careful, Brina," he told me once, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "Your father, he forgets that the hammer is for building. He only sees the weight of it." When Thomas died, I was 19. I was devastated. The one person who looked at me and saw a human being was gone. My grief was a quiet, hollow ache in the center of my chest. But for the rest of the family, Thomas's death was a production. Gabrielle turned the funeral into the social event of the season. She wore a black dress that cost more than my car, hired a string quartet, and spent the entire reception accepting condolences with a tragic grace that she had rehearsed in the mirror. Mark gave a eulogy about legacy and passing the torch, positioning himself as the natural successor to Thomas's empire. Jordan spent the funeral networking with my father's business partners, talking about his vision for the future. I stood in the back, wearing a plain black skirt, and felt completely alone. They buried him. They read the will, which left the bulk of the estate and the company shares to Mark, as everyone expected. There was a small stipend for Jordan. There was nothing mentioned for me. I was not surprised. I assumed Thomas knew that if he left me money, Mark would just take it, claiming he was managing it for me. I thought Thomas had left me nothing to protect me from the fight. I was wrong. He had left me everything. He just put a time lock on it. 2 years passed. I was 21, drowning in the tax debt lie my father had spun, working double shifts, and feeling the walls closing in. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was the one who got the mail that day because I had called out sick from the coffee shop with a migraine. A real one, induced by the stress of knowing I had $12 in my checking account. The envelope was thick, creamy white, and heavy. The return address was Henderson & Associates, the most prestigious law firm in downtown Denver. It was addressed to Ms. Sabrina Erickson, not the Erickson family, not Mark Erickson, just me. I took it to my room, my hands trembling. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed where I had cried over missed school trips and stolen savings, and I tore open the seal. There were 10 pages of legal dense text, but the cover letter was clear. Dear Ms. Erickson, per the instructions of the late Thomas Erickson, we are contacting you regarding the activation of the Sabrina Erickson Trust. As of your 21st birthday, plus the requisite 2-year probate hold specified by the deceased, you are now the sole beneficiary of the assets held within. Current value, $7,400,000. I stopped breathing. The numbers swam before my eyes. $7 million. It was a number so large it felt abstract. It was not money. It was a new atmosphere. It was a different gravitational pull. $7 million meant I could buy this house 3 times over. It meant I could leave tonight. It meant I never had to fold another napkin or listen to another lecture about my selfishness again. But there was more. I turned the page. Section 4, paragraph B, the protective clause. The grantor, Thomas Erickson, stipulates that these funds are for the sole benefit of Sabrina Erickson. Recognizing the complex dynamics of the beneficiary's familial relations, the grantor has instated a duress provision should the beneficiary feel that she is under coercion, manipulation, or unsafe pressure from any family members or guardians to liquidate, transfer, or misuse these funds. The trust grants the beneficiary immediate access to the full principal for the purpose of relocation and legal defense, bypassing the standard quarterly distribution schedule. He knew, even from the grave, he knew. He had built a legal fortress around me. Tucked behind the legal documents was a smaller envelope with my name written in shaky, familiar handwriting. I opened it, and the smell of pipe tobacco wafted out, faint but unmistakable. My dearest Brina, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you have survived the wolves for a little while longer. I am sorry I could not leave this to you sooner, but I had to wait until you were old enough to sign your own papers, and until the law would recognize you as an adult, separate from your father. This money is yours, not the family's. Yours. Do not let them guilt you. Do not let them tell you that family shares. Family protects. If they are not protecting you, they are not family. They are just people who share your last name. Don't let them buy your future with a twisted version of loyalty. Run, Brina. Build the life you told me about. Write your stories. Love, Grandpa. I sat there for a long time, the letter pressed against my chest, sobbing, not the quiet, stifled crying I usually did, but deep, racking sobs that shook my whole body. It was the first time in a decade I had felt safe. I had a shield. I had 7 million shields. I wiped my face, hid the documents inside my pillowcase, and tried to compose myself. I needed a plan. I needed to call the lawyer, Mr. Henderson, and set up a separate account. I needed to leave before they found out. But I had underestimated the reach of the Erickson network. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, the landline in the kitchen rang. I was downstairs making tea, trying to calm my nerves. My father picked up the phone in his home office. The door was open. Mark Erickson speaking, he said, his voice booming with its usual authority. There was a pause. Then, the tone of his voice changed. It went from professional to confused, and then to something sharp and alert. Henderson? Yes, I know the firm. My father used you. I am sorry. What trust? There must be a mistake. Thomas's estate was settled 2 years ago. I am the executor. I froze in the kitchen, the kettle screaming in my mind even though it hadn't boiled yet. Sabrina? Mark said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. She is 21. Yes. Why are you contacting her directly? As her father, I handle her financial affairs. Another pause, long and tense. I see, Mark said. The warmth was gone from his voice. It was pure ice now. And the amount? You are obligated to tell me if it affects the family estate tax. 7, I see, 7 million. He hung up the phone. The silence that followed was heavier than lead. I heard his chair scrape against the hardwood floor. I heard his footsteps coming down the hall. They were slow, deliberate footsteps. I turned around just as he entered the kitchen. Gabrielle was right behind him, having emerged from the living room, sensing the shift in the atmosphere like a shark sensing blood in the water. Sabrina, my father said. He looked at me, but it wasn't with anger. It was worse. He looked at me with a sudden, terrifying respect. It was the way a butcher looks at a particularly large cow. Why didn't you tell us you heard from Mr. Henderson? I just got the letter today, I said, my back pressed against the counter. I haven't finished reading it. $7 million. Gabrielle breathed. Her eyes were wide, glazing over with a look of pure avarice. She walked toward me, and for the first time in 10 years, she reached out and touched my arm without pinching or shoving. She stroked my hair. Oh, my sweet girl. My goodness. Thomas. That sneaky old man. He really came through for us, didn't he? For us? I repeated, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The letter said it is for me. Gabrielle laughed, a tinkling, artificial sound. Well, of course, it is in your name, silly, but we are a family. A rising tide lifts all boats. Isn't that right, Mark? It is a significant responsibility, Mark said, leaning against the doorframe, crossing his arms. He was already calculating. I could see the gears turning behind his eyes. 7 million is a lot of money for a young woman with no financial experience. The tax implications alone are a nightmare. And the investment strategy, you could lose half of that in a year if you don't know what you are doing. We need to sit down and discuss a strategy, Gabrielle said, her grip on my arm tightening just slightly. Jordan has been talking about that startup idea. The tech firm. This is perfect. We can keep the money in the family, invest it where it grows for everyone, and we can pay off the house, and maybe get that vacation home in Vail we have been talking about. It would be a family asset. I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet, I said. I tried to sound firm, but my voice wavered. Decided? Mark chuckled, shaking his head. Sabrina, be realistic. You work at a coffee shop. You don't know the first thing about wealth management. I have been running this family's finances for 30 years. You are going to sign power of attorney over to me, just for the investment side of things. We will set up a family trust. It is for your own protection. You don't want people coming out of the woodwork trying to scam you, do you? The only people trying to scam me are standing in this room. I thought. That night, dinner was surreal. Usually, dinner was a tense affair where I ate quickly and started clearing the dishes while they talked. Tonight, Gabrielle had ordered takeout from the most expensive steakhouse in the city. She had set a place for me at the head of the table, where my grandfather used to sit. Jordan was there, buzzing with energy. Mark must have texted him. So, the heiress? Jordan grinned, raising his glass of wine. 7 mil. That is insane. Sabby, seriously, Mom told me, listen, I have been looking at this commercial real estate portfolio. If we leverage about 3 million of that cash as a down payment, we can secure a loan for a 20-unit complex. The ROI is massive. I can manage the property. You just put up the capital. We split the profit 60-40. I mean, since I'm doing the work, right? We can talk about business later, Gabrielle chided him gently, pouring more wine into my glass. Let her breathe. Jordan, tonight is about celebrating. Our Sabrina is going to change everything for us. For us, for us, for us. The phrase echoed in my head like a warning siren. I looked at the steak on my plate. I looked at Jordan's eager, greedy face. I looked at Gabrielle's predatory smile. I looked at my father, who was already typing on his phone, probably drafting the power of attorney documents he planned to make me sign in the morning. They didn't care about me. They didn't care that Thomas had loved me. They only cared that I was now the carrier of the checkbook. I had gone from being the servant to being the bank. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that if I tried to say no, the smiles would vanish. If I tried to take my $7 million and walk out the door, things would get ugly. They had spent years breaking down my boundaries for spare change. For $7 million, they would burn me to the ground. I touched the pocket of my jeans, where I had hidden the key to my bedroom door, a new lock I had secretly installed 2 days ago. "I am really tired," I said, standing up. My legs felt like jelly. "I think I just need to sleep. It is a lot to process." "Of course, honey," Gabrielle cooed. "You sleep. We will have the paperwork ready for you to look at over breakfast. Mark can explain everything. It will be so simple. You won't have to worry about a thing." "Right," I said. "Good night." I walked up the stairs, feeling their eyes boring into my back. I could feel the shift in the air pressure. The storm wasn't just coming. It was here. The $7 million hadn't set me free. It had just painted a giant target on my back. I went into my room and locked the door. Then I wedged a chair under the handle, just to be sure. I pulled the letter out of my pillowcase and read Thomas's words again. "Do not let them buy your future." I lay in the dark, listening to the murmur of their voices downstairs. They were planning. They were already spending my money. They were already rewriting my life. But they didn't know about the clause. They didn't know that the harder they squeezed, the faster I could run. I closed my eyes and visualized the number 7 million. I visualized a door opening, and for the first time in my life, I decided that I wasn't going to be the one who folded. I was going to be the one who played the winning hand. The dinner was billed as a celebration of family legacy, but as I sat at the mahogany table, surrounded by the heavy scent of roasted lamb and expensive red wine, it felt more like a corporate hostility takeover. Gabrielle had set the table with the good china, the Wedgwood plates that were usually reserved for the mayor or my father's managing partners. The lighting was dim, the candles were flickering, and the air was so thick with tension you could have cut it with the silver steak knife resting by my right hand. My father, Mark, did not wait for dessert to begin the ambush. He cleared his throat, wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, and reached under the table. He pulled out a thick manila envelope and placed it on the table. The sound of the paper hitting the wood echoed in the silence. "Sabrina," he began, his voice dropping into that deep, reassuring baritone he used when closing a deal. "We have been doing a lot of thinking since the news about your grandfather's trust came to light yesterday. It is a blessing, truly, but it is also a burden. $7 million is a dangerous amount of capital for someone without financial literacy." He slid the envelope toward me. It moved across the polished wood like a shark cutting through water. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my hands in my lap. I could feel my palms sweating. "It is a standard power of attorney and a management agreement," Mark said smoothly. "I had the family lawyer drafted up this morning. It simply authorizes me to oversee the investment portfolio on your behalf. It gives me the power to make trades, manage real estate acquisitions, and handle tax liabilities for you. It effectively wraps your trust into the wider Erickson family estate, which protects it from market volatility." I stared at the envelope. I didn't touch it. "Does it give you access to withdraw funds?" I asked. Mark blinked, looking slightly offended. "It gives me management rights. Sabrina, to manage money, one must be able to move it. But that is beside the point. The point is that I have 30 years of experience. You have experience making cappuccinos. Do you really think you can navigate the IRS alone? Do you want to lose half of Thomas's legacy to capital gains taxes because you were too stubborn to ask for help?" Gabrielle chimed in then, leaning forward, her face arranged in a mask of deep maternal concern. She reached out and touched my hand, her fingers cold. "We are just trying to protect you. Sweetie," she cooed. "You know how overwhelmed you get. Remember when you tried to do your own taxes and got that penalty? We had to bail you out. We just don't want to see you get in trouble again. This way, you can just relax. You can keep your little job at the coffee shop if you like, live your life, and let the men handle the heavy lifting. My little job. The job that paid for my gas, my clothes, and the taxes on the income I never saw. I would like to read it first, I said. My voice was quiet, but it held steady. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Read it? Jordan scoffed. He was slouching in his chair, swirling his wine glass. He looked at me with open contempt. It is legal jargon. Sabrina, you won't understand half of it. Just sign the thing. Dad knows what he is doing. I am sure he does, I said, looking at my father. But I promised Grandpa I would be responsible. Being responsible means reading what I sign. I will take it to my room tonight and look it over. Mark's jaw tightened. A vein pulsed in his temple. We need to file these by tomorrow morning to catch the start of the fiscal quarter. He lied. I knew it was a lie. Fiscal quarters didn't start in the middle of October. You can read it here, sign it, and we can all have dessert and toast to your future. I am not signing anything tonight, I said. I reached out and took the envelope. I am tired. I need to process this. I stood up before they could stop me. The scrape of my chair against the floor was loud and harsh. I saw Gabrielle's eyes narrow into slits. I saw Mark's hand clench into a fist on the table, but they let me walk away. They thought they had time. They thought I was just being difficult, not dangerous. Once I was in my room, with the door locked and the chair wedged under the handle, I opened the envelope. I didn't understand all the legal terms, but I understood enough. Irrevocable, full discretion, unrestricted access. It wasn't a management agreement. It was a surrender. If I signed this, Mark could drain the account into his own businesses, call it an investment, and leave me with nothing but the tax bill. I pulled out my phone and took clear, high-resolution photos of every single page. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to brace my elbows against my desk. I sent the images to an encrypted email address I had set up the night before, and then I sent a text to the number on the business card Mr. Henderson had included in the trust packet. I need help. They are trying to make me sign this. Sabrina. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house had shifted from corporate pressure to emotional warfare. I came down to the kitchen to find Gabrielle crying. She wasn't just weeping. She was performing a tragedy. She sat at the island, a handkerchief pressed to her eyes, while Mark rubbed her back. It just hurts. Mark, she sobbed loud enough for me to hear as I entered. After everything I have done, I raised her like my own. I bathed her. I fed her. I drove her to school. And now? She looks at us like we are thieves. It breaks my heart to raise such an ungrateful child. She looked up and saw me, her eyes red and puffy. Sabrina, she choked out, how can you be so cold? We are your family. We are the only people in the world who care about you. Do you think your friends at the coffee shop care? Do you think some lawyer cares? We are blood. Well, Mark is blood, and I have loved you since you were 12. Why are you punishing us? The guilt hit me in the chest like a physical blow. It was a conditioned response, programmed into me over a decade. I am bad. I am selfish. I am hurting them. I felt the urge to apologize, to fix it, to sign the paper just to make her stop crying. But then I touched the pocket of my jeans where my phone was. I thought about the notebook hidden under my floorboard. $2,500 for a tax error that wasn't mine. I am not punishing anyone, I said, pouring myself coffee. I am just reading a contract. It is not a contract, Mark exploded. He slammed his hand down on the granite counter, making the toaster jump. It is trust. It is about trust, Sabrina. If you don't trust your own father to manage your money, then what kind of daughter are you? You are insulting me. You are insulting my competence and my integrity. If it is about trust, I said, looking him in the eye, then trust me to manage it. Jordan walked in then, wearing a silk robe, looking sleepy and annoyed. He saw the standoff and rolled his eyes. Oh my God, is she still holding out? Jordan laughed, opening the fridge. Give it up, Sabby. You are a barista. You make $11 an hour. You are not a millionaire. You are just a temporary holding account for the family capital. You are not worthy of managing $7 million. You wouldn't even know how to buy a bond. Stop playing pretend and give Dad the pen." "Not worthy." The words hung in the air, and in that moment, the guilt evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. They didn't see a daughter. They didn't see a sister. They saw an ATM that had developed a glitch. They didn't love me. They loved the lifestyle I could buy them. Gabrielle's tears were fake. Mark's outrage was about control, and Jordan's insults were just the honest expression of how they all viewed me, as an inferior creature who existed to serve them. I put my coffee cup down. "I have to go to work," I said. "If you walk out that door without signing," Mark threatened, his voice low and dangerous, "don't expect us to be here for you when you fail, and you will fail. Sabrina, the world eats girls like you alive." "I will take my chances," I said. I drove straight to a parking lot behind a grocery store 3 towns over. I parked my car and dialed the number for the lawyer, Marissa Cole, an associate of Mr. Henderson who had texted me back at midnight. "Ms. Erickson," Marissa's voice was sharp, professional, and incredibly grounding. "I reviewed the documents you sent over. Do not sign them. Under no circumstances are you to sign them. That document effectively strips you of all beneficial ownership while leaving you with the tax liability. It is predatory." "They are pressuring me," I whispered, looking out the window to make sure no one was watching, even though I was miles away. "My father, he is scary when he doesn't get what he wants." "Listen to me, Sabrina," Marissa said. "They have no legal right to that money. None. It is yours. Your grandfather made sure of it. The trust is airtight. Unless you sign it away, they cannot touch a cent. Are you safe? Do you need to leave tonight?" "I am safe for now," I said. "They think they can still manipulate me. If I leave now, they might try to freeze things or claim I am mentally unstable. I need to be ready." "Smart," Marissa said. "Okay, first step. Secure your access. Go to a bank, not your father's bank, and open a new checking account. I will authorize a small distribution from the trust, $10,000, just to get you liquid. We can't release the full $7 million without triggering the main clause or the scheduled disbursement, but I can get you emergency expenses under the maintenance provision." $10,000? It was more money than I had ever seen in my account at one time. "Okay," I said. "I can do that." "And Sabrina," Marissa added, "document everything. If they threaten you, if they extort you, write it down. Record it if you can legally do so. If we need to trigger the duress clause to get you the full amount early, we need proof that isn't just he said, she said." I spent the rest of the day living a double life. I went to work and poured lattes, smiling at customers, while my mind was racing. On my lunch break, I went to a credit union on the other side of the city. I opened an account in my name only. When the teller handed me the starter checks, I felt like she was handing me a weapon. Then I sat in my car and downloaded a voice recording app on my phone. I set it to activate with a single tap on the home screen. Then I started looking for apartments. I didn't look in the suburbs. I looked in downtown Denver, in the Arts District, places where my father would never be caught dead. I found a listing for a studio apartment in a converted warehouse. It was small, exposed brick, with a view of an alleyway, and it cost $1,200 a month. It was perfect. I called the landlord. "I can pay 6 months' rent up front," I told him. "But I need to move in on the 1st of November, and I need the lease to be confidential." He sounded surprised, but agreed to show it to me the next day. When I drove home that evening, the house loomed in the twilight like a fortress. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a moment. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I was going back into the lion's den, but this time, I wasn't a lamb. I was a spy. I walked into the kitchen. Gabrielle was chopping vegetables with aggressive force. Mark was sitting at the table with a glass of scotch. "Did you come to your senses?" Mark asked without looking up. I tapped the screen of my phone in my pocket. Recording on. "I am still thinking about it," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "It is a big decision." "It is not a big decision," Mark snapped. "It is the only decision. If you don't sign that paper by the end of the week, Sabrina, I am going to start charging you rent, market rate, for the last 10 years. You want to be an adult? Adults pay bills. I will garnish your wages. I will sue you for back expenses if I have to." I felt a chill run down my spine. He was threatening to sue his own daughter for the cost of raising her. "You would sue me?" I asked, making sure to speak clearly for the microphone. "I will do whatever it takes to protect this family's assets from your incompetence," Mark said. "And if you think you can hire a lawyer with coffee shop money, you are delusional. I will bury you in legal fees before you even get to a courtroom. You will be bankrupt, Sabrina, and then you will come crawling back, and I will make you sign it anyway. So save us both the trouble. And don't think you will be welcome at the club, or anywhere else in town," Gabrielle added, pointing the knife at me. "I will make sure everyone knows you abandoned your family. You will be a pariah." "I understand," I said. "You are saying that if I don't give you control of the money, you will financially destroy me and ruin my reputation." "We are saying you need to do the right thing," Gabrielle corrected, her voice sickly sweet again. "Don't twist our words." I went upstairs. I saved the recording. I named the file Mark Threat 1. That night, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom. I looked at my reflection. I saw the dark circles under my eyes, the slump in my shoulders from years of making myself small. I took a deep breath and stood up straight. I pulled my shoulders back. I lifted my chin. "No," I whispered. It sounded weak. I shook my head. "No," I said louder. I looked myself in the eye. I imagined Mark's angry face. I imagined Gabrielle's guilt trips. I imagined Jordan's sneer. "No," I said, my voice firm and resonant. "It is my money. It is my life. No." I repeated it until the word didn't feel like a rebellion anymore. It felt like a fact. I was 21 years old. I had a lawyer. I had $10,000 in a secret account. I had a studio apartment waiting for me. They thought they were tightening the noose, but they didn't realize they were just cutting the last threads of my loyalty. They were pushing me, yes, but they were pushing me right out the door. I turned off the light and got into bed, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The texts from Jordan started coming in at midnight. Links to articles about lottery winners who went broke. Passive-aggressive memes about ungrateful children. I screenshotted every single one. "Keep talking. I thought as I drifted off to sleep, every word you say is buying my freedom." The week leading up to Jordan's 23rd birthday party was a masterclass in orchestrated chaos. Gabrielle had decided that a simple birthday bash was too pedestrian for a future business mogul. So she had rebranded the evening as the Young Innovators Charity Gala. Ostensibly, it was to raise money for a local youth entrepreneurship fund. In reality, it was a tax-deductible way to parade Jordan in front of Denver's elite, hoping one of my father's wealthy friends would offer him a vice presidency he hadn't earned. The house was invaded by a small army of florists, caterers, and lighting technicians. I was, as usual, the unpaid logistical coordinator. I managed the delivery schedules, ensured the ice sculptures didn't melt in the foyer, and fielded frantic texts from Gabrielle about the shade of the napkins. But the real production happened on Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the party. I walked into the living room to find it transformed into a makeshift dressing room. Racks of designer clothes were wheeled in, blocking the view of the garden. A team of 3 personal stylists, hired from the most exclusive agency in Cherry Creek, were fluttering around Gabrielle and Jordan like hummingbirds around a pair of particularly demanding flowers. Gabrielle stood on a podium in front of a full-length mirror, draped in a shimmering emerald green gown that cost more than my car. She looked magnificent and predatory. "A little tighter at the waist," she commanded the tailor who was kneeling at her feet with a mouthful of pins. "I want the silhouette to be aggressive, power dressing, you know?" Jordan was lounging on the sofa, scrolling on his phone while a stylist held up a series of Italian velvet blazers for his approval. "I don't know, Mom," he said, barely looking up. "The midnight blue is cool, but does it say visionary? I want to look like I just invented an app." "The blue brings out your eyes, Jordan," Gabrielle said. "It says trustworthy. It says leader. I stood in the doorway, holding a clipboard with the catering finalization forms. For a moment, no one noticed me. I watched them, this tableau of vanity, and felt that familiar, cold ache in my chest. It wasn't just the money, though the thousands of dollars of clothing in this room was staggering. It was the care. It was the attention to detail. They were being crafted into masterpieces. Then Gabrielle saw me in the mirror. Her expression didn't change. She didn't smile or turn around. "Sabrina," she said, checking her reflection's profile. "Did the valet service confirm the extra staff? We can't have a bottleneck at the driveway." "They confirmed," I said. "I have the contract here." "Good. Put it on the desk." I walked over to the desk, feeling the eyes of the stylists on me. I was wearing my uniform, fading jeans and a gray t-shirt that had a small bleach stain near the hem. I felt invisible, a smudge on their perfect picture. "What are you wearing for the party, Sabrina?" The question came from the lead stylist, a woman with severe glasses who clearly assumed I was also a client. She reached for a garment bag on the end of the rack. "We have some lovely cocktail options if you—" "Oh, Sabrina doesn't need a fitting," Gabrielle cut in sharply. She turned around, her silk dress rustling. "She is going to be helping the catering staff manage the flow of the room. She needs to be mobile, functional." She looked at me then, her eyes sweeping over my body with a dismissive familiarity. "Just wear that black shift dress you wore to the Christmas party 3 years ago," Gabrielle said. "It is unobtrusive. You want to blend in, sweetie. The focus is on Jordan and the cause. We don't want to distract the donors. Blend in, disappear, be the shadow." "That dress has a hole in the seam," I said. My voice was quiet. "Well, sew it up," Jordan muttered, tossing a blazer onto the floor. "You have hands, don't you?" Gabrielle laughed lightly. "Exactly, just fix it. Or wear slacks and a blouse. Just keep it neutral, black or navy. You are working the room, not walking the runway." I looked at the racks of clothes, silk, velvet, cashmere, textures I wasn't allowed to touch. "Okay," I said. I walked out of the room, but I didn't go to the kitchen to check the oven. I walked straight to the front door, grabbed my purse, and walked out to my car. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Blend in. I sat in the driver's seat of my Honda, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I thought about the $7 million sitting in a trust fund I couldn't touch yet. I thought about the $10,000 Marissa had released to my secret account. But using the trust money felt like a nuclear option. I wasn't ready to detonate the bomb yet. I reached into my purse and pulled out my wallet. Inside was my debit card for the account where my barista wages went. My money I had earned standing on my feet for 8 hours a day, dealing with rude customers and burning my fingers on steam wands. I had $300 left after paying for gas and the secret deposit on the apartment. I started the car. I wasn't going to wear the black dress with the hole in the seam. I wasn't going to be the shadow. I drove to the Cherry Creek Mall. I didn't go into the ultra-high-end boutiques where Gabrielle shopped. I didn't want to run into anyone we knew. I went to a department store, the kind with bright lights and racks of reasonably priced luxury. I walked through the aisles, trailing my fingers over the fabrics. Red? Too aggressive. Blue? Too similar to what Jordan was wearing. Black? Absolutely not. Then I saw it. It was hanging on a mannequin near the back, a white slip dress. It wasn't elaborate. It didn't have sequins or feathers or complex embroidery. It was made of heavy, fluid silk that looked like poured milk. It had thin spaghetti straps and a cowl neckline that draped softly. It was simple, elegant, and completely unapologetically visible. White, the color of brides, the color of saints, the color of someone who has nothing to hide. I took my size into the fitting room. My hands were shaking as I stripped off my gray t-shirt and jeans. I stepped into the silk. It slid over my skin like cool water. I zipped it up. I looked in the mirror. For a long time, I just stared. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She didn't look like a victim. She didn't look like a servant. The dress skimmed my body, highlighting curves I usually hid under baggy sweaters. The white fabric made my skin look luminous. I looked important. I looked like the main character in a movie, the one the camera follows when she walks into a room. I took a deep breath, and the woman in the mirror stood taller. "Wow," a voice said from the door. I turned. A sales associate, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, was standing there holding a few other hangers. She lowered them slowly. "That was made for you," she said. She wasn't using her sales voice. She sounded genuinely struck. "It fits you perfectly." "It is a bit much, isn't it?" I asked, my confidence wavering. "For a birthday party?" "Honey," she said, stepping into the room to adjust the hem. "You don't wear a dress like that to attend a party. You wear a dress like that to be the party." She looked at my face, at the dark circles under my eyes that the harsh lighting couldn't hide, and then at the way I was holding myself, fragile but determined. "You look like you are stepping into a new chapter," she said softly, "like you are done with the old one." Tears pricked my eyes. A new chapter. "How much is it?" I asked. "It is on sale," she said, checking the tag. $200, even. $200. That was 20 hours of work. That was 2 weeks of groceries. That was a significant chunk of my escape fund. But looking at myself in the mirror, seeing Sabrina Erickson instead of Mark's daughter or Jordan's sister, I knew it was the best investment I could make. "I will take it," I said. I paid with my debit card. The transaction approved. I walked out of the store carrying the white garment bag like it contained the crown jewels. When I got home, it was nearly dinner time. The house smelled of garlic and roasting chicken, dinner I was supposed to have started an hour ago. I walked into the kitchen through the garage door. Gabrielle was standing by the island, scrolling through her iPad. She looked up, her face tightening into a scowl when she saw the shopping bag in my hand. It wasn't a grocery bag. It was a glossy white bag with the department store's logo. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "The chicken isn't even in the oven. Mark will be home in 20 minutes. "I went shopping," I said. I placed the bag on the counter. I didn't hide it. Gabrielle stared at the bag. Her eyes narrowed. She walked over and pulled the tissue paper aside, peering in. When she saw the white silk, her head snapped up. "What is this?" she asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It is a dress," I said. "For the party." "A white dress?" She pulled it out, holding it up against her own emerald silk. She looked at the fabric, assessing the quality instantly. "This isn't cheap polyester. How much was this?" $200, I said. The silence that followed was deafening. Gabrielle looked at the dress, then at me, as if I had just confessed to burning down the garage. $200? She repeated. "You spent $200 on a dress?" "Yes." "You selfish little brat," she hissed. She threw the dress back onto the counter. "We just had a conversation yesterday about how tight money is. Jordan needs new tires for the winter. We are paying for this entire gala out of pocket until the donations come in. And you go out and blow $200 on vanity?" "It is my money, Gabrielle," I said. "From my paycheck. I earned it." "It is family money," she shouted. "You live under this roof. You eat our food. That $200 could have paid for the floral centerpieces I had to downgrade. It could have gone to Jordan's campaign fund. How dare you be so indulgent when your brother is trying to build a future?" My father walked in then, his briefcase in hand. He sensed the tension immediately. "What is going on?" Mark asked, looking between us. "Your daughter," Gabrielle said, pointing a shaking finger at me, "just spent $200 on a dress for herself, a white silk dress, while we are scrambling to make sure Jordan's night is perfect." Mark looked at me. He looked at the dress. He didn't look angry at first. He looked disappointed. The kind of disappointment that is designed to crush you. "Sabrina," he sighed, loosening his tie. "We talked about priorities. This party is crucial for Jordan. It is a networking event. You are supposed to be there to support him, not to play dress-up. $200? That is excessive for someone in your position." "My position?" I asked. "You mean as a barista?" or as your daughter? As a member of this family who contributes very little to the bottom line, Mark said coldly, you should have put that money into the house fund, or better yet, given it to Jordan to help with the valet tips. Wearing a dress like that? It sends the wrong message. It says you think you are the center of attention. I just wanted to look nice, I said, grabbing the bag. I just wanted to feel like I belong in this family for one night. You belong when you are helpful, Gabrielle snapped, not when you are trying to outshine the birthday boy. White? Really? Sabrina? It is tacky. You will look like a ghost haunting the buffet table. Take it back, Mark said. It wasn't a suggestion. Take it back tomorrow. Get a refund. Give the cash to Gabrielle for the catering overages. I looked at them, standing there in their expensive clothes, in their expensive kitchen, demanding my $200. It wasn't about the money. $200 was a rounding error to Mark Erickson. It was about the audacity. It was about the fact that I had dared to use my resources on myself. They were terrified. They were terrified because if I could buy a dress, I could buy a ticket. If I could choose white, I could choose to leave. No, I said. Mark blinked. Excuse me? No, I said again. My voice was shaking, but I forced it to be steady. I bought it. It is non-refundable, and I am wearing it. I grabbed the bag and turned toward the stairs. Sabrina, Mark barked. I am speaking to you. I have to go sew the hem, I lied, not stopping. I want to look presentable for Jordan's big night. Isn't that what you wanted? For us to look like a perfect family? I ran up the stairs before they could respond. I heard Gabrielle screeching something about ungrateful and narcissist, but I didn't stop until I was in my room with the door locked. I took the dress out of the bag. I hung it on the back of my door. It shone in the dim light of my bedroom. It looked defiant. They hated it. They hated it because it proved I was no longer sacrificing myself on the altar of Jordan's potential. I touched the silk. It felt like armor. I wasn't going to take it back. I was going to wear it. And when I walked into that party on Saturday, I wasn't going to blend in. I was going to burn their image of me to the ground, simply by existing in high definition. This dress was worth $200, but the look on Gabrielle's face? That was priceless. I sat on my bed and looked at the dress, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I was learning how to swim. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of aggressive perfection that only money can buy. The sky over Denver was a bruised purple, fading into the black of night, while the backyard of the Erickson estate was ablaze with 2,000 fairy lights. It looked less like a home and more like a movie set for a film about people who were happier than we were. The transformation was total. The lawn had been manicured to within an inch of its life. White tents peaked like meringue across the grass. Sheltering tables laden with crystal glassware and silver candelabras. A jazz quartet played softly near the pool, their music competing with the clink of ice and the murmur of 100 wealthy guests. I stood in the shadows of the catering tent, near the back entrance of the kitchen. This was my assigned post. Despite the $200 silk dress clinging to my body, a dress that made me feel like a warrior queen, Gabrielle had made it clear that my role tonight was operational, not social. Just keep an eye on the champagne supply, she had hissed at me earlier, her nails digging into my arm as she shoved a heavy tray into my hands. And stay out of the photographs. We want the focus on Jordan. She was wearing her emerald gown, looking every inch the benevolent matriarch. Jordan was preening in the center of the patio, wearing his midnight blue velvet blazer, holding court with a group of his business school friends and a few of my father's investors. He looked golden, charming, and completely fraudulent. I watched them from my exile by the ice buckets. I adjusted the strap of my white dress. I felt the cool silk against my skin. A constant reminder that I had defied them. They had told me to return it. I had worn it. They had told me to blend in. I was glowing in the dim light like a beacon. Every time a guest walked by the catering tent looking for the bathroom or a refill, they stopped. They looked at me. Sabrina? Mrs. Henderson, our neighbor, paused with a glass of Chardonnay halfway to her lips. My goodness, is that you? You look stunning. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson, I said, smiling a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I barely recognized you without the apron, she laughed, a little too loudly. You look like a film star. Where has Gabrielle been hiding this version of you? I have been here the whole time, I said quietly. Gabrielle noticed the attention I was getting. I saw her head snap toward me from across the lawn, her eyes narrowing. She whispered something to Mark, who frowned and adjusted his tie. They were nervous. The white dress was doing exactly what I wanted it to do. It was making me visible. The night wore on. The speeches began. Mark stood on the raised platform built over the pool, tapping a spoon against his champagne flute. The crowd hushed. The jazz band stopped playing. Friends, colleagues, family, Mark began, his voice projecting with that smooth, executive confidence that had fooled boardrooms for decades. We are gathered here tonight to celebrate my son, Jordan, a young man of vision, a young man of drive. The crowd applauded politely. Jordan stepped up beside him, feigning humility, bowing his head. But, Mark continued, raising a hand for silence, a young man needs tools to build his empire, and in the Erickson family, we believe in supporting our own. We believe that when one of us rises, we all rise. My stomach tightened. I knew that tone. That was the tone he used before he closed a deal that screwed over the other party. Tonight is not just about Jordan, Mark said, sweeping his arm toward the back of the yard, directly toward where I was standing. It is also about the bond between siblings, my daughter, Sabrina. The spotlight swung. It cut through the darkness and hit me, blindingly bright. I froze. This wasn't in the script. I was supposed to be invisible. Sabrina, come up here, Mark beckoned, flashing a smile that looked more like a baring of teeth. The crowd turned. 100 faces stared at me. I had no choice. If I ran, I looked insane. If I stayed, I looked petulant. I put down the champagne bottle I was holding and walked across the lawn. The white silk of my dress caught the wind, rippling around my legs. I walked with my head high, despite the terror clawing at my throat. I climbed the steps to the platform. Mark put a heavy arm around my shoulders. He smelled of scotch and expensive cologne. He squeezed me, hard. It was a warning. Sabrina has recently come into a significant inheritance from her grandfather, Mark announced to the crowd. A ripple of whispers went through the guests. And although she is young, she understands the value of family investment. She came to me this week and said, "Dad, I want to do something for Jordan. I want to help him get to where he is going." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He pressed it into my hand. Sabrina has decided to use the first distribution of her trust to present Jordan with the keys to his new Porsche 911, Mark boomed. A symbol of her faith in his future. Go ahead, honey, give them to him. The crowd cheered. Jordan's friends whooped. Jordan stepped forward, grinning. His hands reached out to take the box. Time seemed to stop. It was a trap, a perfect public trap. Mark had leased the car. I had seen the paperwork on his desk yesterday, but didn't put it together. He expected me to pay for it. He was publicly committing my money before I had even signed the papers. If I gave Jordan the keys, I was tacitly agreeing to the arrangement. I was agreeing to be their bank. If I refused, I would humiliate the family in front of the most powerful people in Denver. They were betting on my shame. They were betting on the fact that Sabrina Erickson, the quiet girl who folded napkins and washed dishes, would never dare to make a scene. I looked at the box in my hand. I looked at Jordan's greedy, expectant face. I looked at Gabrielle, who had stepped up behind me. She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. To the crowd, it looked like a motherly affection. "Give him the keys," she hissed, her voice a razor wire. "Do not embarrass us. If you ruin this, you will regret it for the rest of your life." I looked at the crowd. I saw their expectant smiles. They thought this was a heartwarming moment. They didn't see the coercion. They didn't see the years of theft. I looked at the white dress I was wearing, the dress I bought with my own money, the symbol of my choice. I realized then that I didn't care about their embarrassment. I didn't care about the neighbors. I didn't care about the Erickson legacy. I stepped away from Mark's arm. I stepped away from Jordan. I walked to the microphone stand. "Sabrina," Mark said, his smile faltering. "Just hand him the keys, sweetheart." I gripped the microphone. It was cold metal. My hand was shaking, but my voice, when it came out, was clear. It rang out over the speakers, echoing off the stone facade of the house. "My father is mistaken," I said. The silence that fell over the backyard was instant and absolute. The crickets sounded deafening. "I did not buy a car for Jordan," I continued, looking straight at the crowd. "I did not agree to pay for a Porsche, the trust fund my grandfather left me. He left it to me, not to the family, not to Jordan, to me." I turned to Jordan, who looked like he had been slapped. "I am not using my grandfather's legacy to buy you toys. Jordan," I said, my voice gaining strength, "I am using it to leave." I dropped the velvet box on the platform. It landed with a dull thud. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. It was a tableau of pure shock. Mark's face had drained of all color, turning a sickly gray. Then Jordan snapped. The golden boy facade cracked. He didn't see the guests anymore. He only saw the money slipping away. He only saw the humiliation. "You selfish bitch," Jordan screamed. The microphone picked it up perfectly. "Who do you think you are? You are nothing. You are just the help. You think you deserve that money? You are a zero. Sabrina, a zero." The crowd gasped. Mark tried to grab Jordan, but it was too late. The illusion was shattered. And then Gabrielle moved. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She attacked. She launched herself at me with the ferocity of a cornered animal. All the years of pretense, all the years of fake smiles and passive-aggressive comments, boiled over into pure physical rage. "You ungrateful little snake!" she shrieked. She grabbed the front of my dress. Her fingers hooked into the delicate silk of the neckline. She yanked. The sound was sickening. "Reeve!" The strap gave way. The bodice tore. I stumbled back, clutching the fabric to my chest to keep from being exposed. "Gabrielle, stop!" Mark shouted, but he didn't move to intervene. He was too busy looking at the horrified faces of his investors. Gabrielle didn't stop. She lunged again. She slapped me, a hard, stinging blow across the face that knocked the microphone stand over with a screech of feedback. "I took you in," she screamed, grabbing my shoulders. "I gave you a home. And this is how you repay me? By humiliating my son? By stealing our future?" She shoved me. It wasn't a little push. It was a full-body shove, fueled by hysterical strength. I was wearing heels. The platform was slick with evening dew. I lost my footing. I flailed, reaching for something to hold on to, but there was nothing but air. I fell backward off the low platform. I didn't hit the grass. I hit the long buffet table that had been set up next to the pool. My lower back struck the edge of the table first, knocking the wind out of me, but momentum carried me down. My head, my right temple, slammed into the sharp wooden corner of the heavy oak table with a sickening crack. The world exploded into white light and then instantly dissolved into red. I collapsed onto the floor, pulling the tablecloth with me. An avalanche of heavy porcelain platters, silver chafing dishes, and crystal bowls rained down on top of me. Warm, sticky liquid soaked my hair and face. It was the cocktail sauce. It was the punch. And as the warmth spread down my neck, I knew it was blood. I lay there, half buried in debris. My vision was swimming. The white dress, my beautiful symbol of freedom, was ruined. It was stained with red sauce and red blood, torn open at the chest. I couldn't move. My limbs felt disconnected from my body. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard the chaos erupt. "Oh my God, she is bleeding!" someone screamed. "Call 911. Is there a doctor here?" "Don't move her. Don't touch her neck." I looked up. My vision was tunneling, the edges turning black. I saw faces hovering over me, distorted and terrified. I saw Dr. Evans, one of the guests, kneeling beside me, pressing a napkin to my head. His face was grim. "Stay with me, Sabrina," he commanded. "Open your eyes." But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking past him. I saw Gabrielle standing on the platform. She was looking down at me. She wasn't horrified. She wasn't rushing to help. She was panting, her chest heaving, her hair wild. She looked furious that I had dared to bleed on her party. "She owes us!" Gabrielle screamed, her voice cracking, echoing over the stunned silence of the crowd. "She owes this family everything! How dare she!" Mark was trying to pull her back, his face a mask of absolute panic, but not for me, for the PR nightmare unfolding in real time. "She owes us," Gabrielle's voice faded, sounding like it was coming from underwater. The pain in my head was a rhythmic hammer. The smell of the shrimp cocktail sauce was overpowering. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, mixing with the blood. This is it, I thought. As the darkness rushed in to claim me, I told the truth, and they tried to kill me for it. The last thing I heard before the world went black was the distant wail of a siren, coming closer, coming to take me away from the house that had been eating me alive for 10 years. And then, there was nothing. The lights in the hospital room were different from the lights in the ambulance. They were steady, white, and completely indifferent to my pain. I was sitting upright in the bed, a fresh bandage taped over the stitches on my temple, my arm in a sling. The room smelled of bleach and floor wax. "Ms. Erickson," the police officer said. Her name was Officer Reyes. She was sitting in the plastic chair next to my bed, a notepad on her knee. She had a kind face but eyes that didn't miss anything. "I need you to walk me through the events of the evening again, for the record." My throat felt like I had swallowed broken glass. I looked at the officer, a part of me, the part that had been trained by Mark and Gabrielle for a decade, wanted to smooth things over. That old instinct whispered that I should say it was an accident. I should say I tripped. I should protect the family reputation because if the reputation died, I died with it. But then I remembered the shove. I remembered the feeling of air beneath my feet. I remembered Jordan calling me a zero. "It was not an accident," I said. My voice was raspy, but it was steady. "My stepmother, Gabrielle Erickson, attacked me. She ripped my dress, she slapped me, and then she shoved me off the platform." Officer Reyes nodded, writing it down. "And what precipitated this attack?" "I refused to give them money," I said. "My grandfather left me a trust fund. They wanted me to buy a car for my stepbrother. I said no publicly. That is why she hurt me." Officer Reyes stopped writing. She looked at me, her expression hardening. "So this was financial coercion turning into physical assault?" "Yes," I said. "We have video evidence," Officer Reyes said. She turned her tablet around so I could see. I stared at the screen. It was shaky footage, clearly taken on a guest's cell phone, but the image was high definition. I saw myself standing at the microphone, looking terrified but defiant in my white dress. I heard my voice ringing out, refusing to buy the car. I saw Jordan screaming. And then I saw Gabrielle. On the small screen, she looked like a monster. I watched her lunge. I saw the violent jerk of her arm as she tore my strap. I saw the slap, and then I saw the two-handed shove. It wasn't a stumble. It was a deliberate, malicious push meant to hurt. The video ended with the sound of breaking glass and the cameraman gasping. I looked away. Seeing it from the outside made me nauseous. It also made me realize how lucky I was to be alive. If I had hit the table an inch lower, I could have broken my neck. "We have statements from 12 witnesses confirming this footage," Officer Reyes said, turning the tablet off. "And we have the medical report detailing your concussion, the laceration requiring 8 stitches, and the contusions on your back and arms. We have enough to arrest her for assault and battery right now. Do you want to press charges?" "I want them away from me," I said. "I want a restraining order, an immediate one." "We can do that," Reyes said. "But Sabrina, I need you to hear me. No one has the right to put their hands on you. Not your mother, not your father, nobody. Family does not get a free pass on violence. You are the victim of a crime. The victim of a crime, not a clumsy daughter, not an ungrateful brat, a victim. The door to the room opened, and a woman in a sharp gray suit walked in. It was Marisa Cole, the lawyer. She looked like a Valkyrie carrying a leather briefcase. "Officer," Marisa said, nodding to Reyes. Then she turned to me, her eyes softening just a fraction. "Sabrina, I came as soon as I saw the video online. It is everywhere." "Everywhere?" I asked. "Twitter, TikTok, the local news," Marisa said. "Your stepmother is trending, and not in the way she likes, but we have work to do." Marisa set her briefcase on the rolling table. She pulled out a stack of documents. "I spoke to the trustee board an hour ago." Marisa said, "The video evidence of the assault, combined with the police report Officer Reyes is filing, is irrefutable proof of the duress clause being triggered. We don't need to wait for a probate hearing. We don't need your father's permission. The safety of the beneficiary has been compromised." She uncapped a heavy, expensive pen and handed it to me. "This is the petition for immediate dissolution of the trust into your personal control," Marisa said. "Once you sign this, the $7,400,000 is transferred to the private account we opened yesterday. All of it, today." My hand trembled as I took the pen. $7 million. It wasn't just numbers anymore. It was a wall. A 50-foot steel wall between me and the people who had hurt me. I signed my name. The ink was dark and permanent. "Done," Marisa said, stamping the document. "You are now a very wealthy, independent woman." "And the restraining order?" I asked. "Already drafted," Marisa said, pulling out another file. "I am filing for an emergency protective order against Gabrielle, Mark, and Jordan Erickson. They will be barred from coming within 500 feet of you, your workplace, or your residence. Given the video, the judge will grant this within the hour." My phone buzzed on the bedside table. I flinched. "Don't answer it," Marisa said sharply. "It is a voicemail," I said, looking at the screen. "From Gabrielle." Marissa's eyes narrowed. "Play it. On speaker. Officer Reyes. You should hear this too." I pressed play. Gabrielle's voice filled the sterile room. She sounded frantic, breathless, and terrifyingly familiar. "Sabrina, pick up the phone. This is ridiculous. Look, things got heated, okay? I am sorry I pushed you, but you provoked me. You humiliated us in front of the governor. You need to tell the police it was an accident. If you press charges, you are destroying this family. Do you hear me? If you ruin Jordan's reputation with this, I will make sure you never work in this town again. I will sue you for everything you have. Just come home, and we can fix this. Don't be a little bitch about it." The message ended. Officer Reyes let out a low whistle. "Well," she said, standing up, "that is witness tampering and a threat. She just did our job for us." "Save that recording," Marisa commanded. "That is the nail in the coffin for the restraining order." A nurse walked in then, looking concerned. "Ms. Erickson, we are discharging you soon, but the social worker needs to know. Do you have a safe place to go? We can arrange a bed at a shelter for domestic violence survivors if you don't feel safe going home." I looked at the nurse. I looked at Marisa. I thought about the studio apartment in the warehouse district with the exposed brick and the view of the alley. I thought about the check I had written for 6 months of rent. "I don't need a shelter," I said. "I have an apartment. I have had it for 3 days." Marisa smiled. It was a genuine, proud smile. "You were ready." "I was ready," I agreed. "Sabrina," Officer Reyes said, putting her notepad away. "Regarding the criminal charges, the district attorney will see the video. They will likely pursue assault charges regardless of what you do. But do you want to actively testify? Do you want to drag this out in criminal court for the next year?" I thought about it. I thought about sitting in a courtroom, looking at Gabrielle's face, listening to her lies, having my father stare at me with those cold, disappointed eyes. I thought about the media circus. "No," I said. "I don't want to see them. I don't want to talk to them. I want the restraining order to keep them away. I want the money so I can disappear. If the state wants to prosecute her based on the video, fine. but I am not going to make my life about fighting them anymore. I am making my life about leaving them." "Understood," Reyes said. "I will file the report as victim cooperating but requesting privacy. The restraining order will be served to them at their residence tonight. If they try to contact you, if they text, call, or drive by your apartment, you call 911 immediately. They will go to jail." "They won't know where I live," I said. "They don't know about the apartment." "Good," Marissa said. "Keep it that way." An hour later, I was dressed. The white silk dress was in a biohazard bag. Ruined. I was wearing a set of scrubs the hospital had given me and a pair of cheap foam slippers. I had a bandage on my head and a bruise blooming across my jaw that was turning a violent shade of purple. But as I signed the discharge papers, I felt lighter than air. I held the folder Marissa had given me. Inside was the confirmation of the wire transfer, $7 million, and the temporary restraining order signed by a judge. I walked out of the hospital room. I walked down the long antiseptic corridor. I didn't look back. When the automatic doors slid open, the cold night air hit my face. It was sharp and clean. It didn't smell like expensive perfume or roasted lamb or fear. It smelled like gasoline and city rain. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs until they ached. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jordan. "You represent nothing. You are going to pay for this." I didn't reply. I blocked the number. Then I blocked Mark. Then I blocked Gabrielle. I hailed a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked, looking at my bandaged head in the rearview mirror. I gave him the address of the warehouse district. My address. "I am going home," I said. And for the first time in 23 years, it was true. I was free. I was bruised. I was battered. And I was alone. But I was the owner of my own life. And nobody was ever going to touch me again. The silence in my new apartment was thick and heavy, but it was a peaceful heaviness. It was the silence of a fortress. For the first 3 days after I left the hospital, I sat on my floor in the warehouse district, surrounded by moving boxes, watching the world burn down around my stepmother through the glowing screen of my phone. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in the 21st century, revenge is served digitally, and it travels at the speed of light. The video of the party had gone viral within 3 hours of the ambulance leaving the driveway. It was everywhere. Someone had uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "Rich Mom Goes Feral," and by Monday morning, it had 6 million views. It was impossible to look away. The footage was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. You could hear my voice, steady and defiant, refusing to buy the car. You could hear Jordan screaming that I was a zero, and then you could see it, the lunge, the rip of the white silk, the slap that sounded like a gunshot, the shove. The internet did not need a jury. The verdict was immediate and absolute. Gabrielle Erickson, the woman who had spent 20 years curating an image of effortless elegance and maternal warmth, was stripped naked before the world. The comments were brutal. They called her a monster. They analyzed the way she gripped my dress. They made memes of her screaming face. The fallout was not just digital, it was financial, and it was swift. I received updates from Marissa, who seemed to take a grim satisfaction in relaying the news. Gabrielle had been the chairwoman for the Denver Arts Gala, a position she had fought tooth and nail to secure. On Tuesday, the board issued a public statement accepting her resignation effective immediately. The charity she was supposed to be fundraising for returned her personal donation and scrubbed her name from their website. Socially, she was radioactive. The women who used to drink wine in our living room, the ones who had praised her parenting while I refilled their glasses, now gave interviews saying they had always suspected she was volatile. They distanced themselves with the speed of rats fleeing a sinking ship. But the rot went deeper than Gabrielle's social calendar. It reached Mark and Jordan, too. Jordan received a letter from the admissions dean of the prestigious business school he was set to attend in the fall. They were rescinding his offer of admission due to behavior incompatible with the university's code of conduct. The video of him screaming slurs at his sister was apparently not the leadership quality they were looking for. And then there was Mark. My father had built his entire career on the reputation of being a steady hand, a man of family values and corporate stability. Now, he was the man who stood by and watched his wife assault his daughter over a trust fund dispute, the stock price of Ericsson Industries, the logistics firm my grandfather had founded and my father now ran, dipped by 4% on Wednesday. That was when the second letter from my grandfather came into play. On Thursday morning, Marissa called me. "Sabrina," she said, her voice crisp, "we need to discuss the secondary assets in the trust. You were so focused on the cash liquid assets that we haven't gone over the portfolio holdings yet." "What holdings?" I asked, unpacking a set of mugs in my new kitchen. "Your grandfather, Thomas, didn't just leave you money," Marissa said. "He left you his voting shares in Ericsson Industries. When he stepped down as CEO, he retained a 30% stake in the company. He placed those shares in the trust. Mark has been voting by proxy for years because the shares were technically held in trust. But now that the trust is dissolved and the assets are yours, the proxy is void." I stopped moving. 30%. "What does that mean, Marissa?" "It means you are the largest single shareholder in the company," Marissa said. "And there is an emergency board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning to discuss the PR crisis caused by your father. As a major shareholder, you have a seat at that table." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It wasn't fear, it was anticipation. "Tell them I will be there," I said. The next morning, I dressed with the precision of a soldier going to war. I didn't wear the white dress. That was a symbol of my innocence, and innocence was gone. I wore a sharp, tailored navy suit I had bought the day before. I pulled my hair back to reveal the healing cut on my temple. I wanted them to see it. I wanted the stitches to be the first thing they looked at. I took an Uber to the glass and steel headquarters of Ericsson Industries downtown. The receptionist tried to stop me at the elevator, looking confused. "I am sorry, miss. The boardroom is restricted," she said. "I am Sabrina Ericsson," I said, not breaking stride. "I own the room." I walked into the meeting 10 minutes late. It was a power move Gabrielle would have appreciated, had she not been the target of it. The boardroom was silent. Mark was sitting at the head of the long granite table, looking 10 years older than he had last week. His face was gray, his eyes hollow. He was in the middle of explaining something to the 12 other board members, men and women in expensive suits who looked skeptical and impatient. When I opened the door, Mark stopped mid-sentence. "Sabrina?" he whispered. "What are you doing here? You can't be here. This is a closed meeting." I didn't look at him. I looked at the chairman of the board, Mr. Sterling, a man who had known my grandfather. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," I said, walking to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table from my father. "I apologize for the tardiness. My lawyer was just briefing me on my voting rights regarding the 30% stake I inherited on Saturday." Mr. Sterling looked at me, then at the bandage on my head, then at Mark. He didn't tell me to leave. He gestured to the chair. "Ms. Ericsson," Mr. Sterling said gravely, "we were just discussing the situation." "You mean the assault?" I asked. Sitting down, I placed my hands on the table. "The assault committed by the wife of the CEO, witnessed by the CEO, against the primary shareholder?" Mark stood up. "Now see here, Sabrina, this is a family matter. You are taking this too far." "It ceased to be a family matter when your wife threw me off a stage." "Mark," I said. I didn't call him Dad. I couldn't. "And it became a business matter when the company stock dropped 4% because the market realized the CEO cannot manage his own household, let alone a multi-million-dollar corporation." The room went deadly quiet. The board members were exchanging looks. They knew I was right. They cared about profits, not Mark's ego. "I have reviewed the bylaws," I continued, my voice steady. "The morality clause in the CEO's contract is quite specific about bringing disrepute to the company name. I believe the millions of views on that video constitute disrepute." "I built this company," Mark shouted, his face turning red. "I took it from a local firm to a regional power after Thomas retired. You cannot come in here with your coffee shop experience and lecture me. I am not lecturing you, I said. I am outvoting you. I turned to Mr. Sterling. I am moving for a vote of no confidence in the CEO, I said. However, out of respect for my grandfather's name, I am willing to offer a compromise. Mark can step down as CEO effective immediately. He can assume the role of Vice President of Special Projects, a non-executive, non-public-facing role, with a 50% reduction in salary and the forfeiture of his annual bonus. Or we can vote to terminate him for cause, in which case he leaves with nothing. Mark looked at the board members. He looked for allies. He found none. They were looking at their papers, at their phones, anywhere but at him. They saw the writing on the wall. The public hated him. The shareholders were spooked. And I, the ghost in the machine, held the keys. Seconded, Mr. Sterling said quietly. Mark collapsed into his chair. It wasn't a physical collapse, but his spirit seemed to disintegrate. The arrogant, powerful man who had terrorized my childhood was gone. In his place was a man who realized he had backed the wrong horse. He had chosen Gabrielle and Jordan over me, and it had cost him his crown. I will take the demotion, Mark whispered. Good, I said. Meeting adjourned. I walked out of the boardroom without shaking his hand. I felt a trembling in my knees as I reached the elevator. But it was the trembling of adrenaline, not fear. I had just toppled the giant. The reaction from the rest of the family was immediate and desperate. Gabrielle realized her social currency was worthless, and her husband's income had just been slashed in half. Tried to go on the offensive. She contacted a tabloid reporter, offering an exclusive interview where she claimed I was mentally unstable, addicted to painkillers, and that the fall at the party was a staged attempt to extort money. It backfired spectacularly. Because I had the medical records, I had the police report, and most importantly, I had the silence. I didn't give interviews. I didn't go on talk shows to cry. I simply had Marissa release a short statement. Ms. Erickson is focusing on her recovery and her investments. She wishes her family well in their journey toward accountability. Any further libelous statements will be met with litigation. The public saw Gabrielle's ranting for what it was, the desperate flailing of a drowning woman. The more she talked, the more guilty she looked. The tabloid pulled the story after Marissa sent a cease and desist letter regarding the medical claims. Jordan was the one who broke first. 2 weeks after the board meeting, I was sitting in a cafe in downtown Denver, reading a book. My phone rang. It was a new number, but I knew who it was. I answered. Sabrina? Jordan's voice was small. Gone was the swagger. Gone was the arrogance. He sounded like a child. What do you want, Jordan? I asked. She is losing it, he said. She is drinking all day. Dad won't talk to her. He just sits in the den in the dark. The house feels like a morgue. That sounds difficult, I said neutrally. I need help, Sabby, he stammered. The school rescinded my offer. Dad says he can't pay for an apartment for me because his salary got cut. He says I have to get a job, a real job. So get one, I said. But I don't know how to do anything, he cried. I was supposed to go to business school. I was supposed to have the startup capital. You have $7 million. You have shares. You could loan me $50,000. Just to get set up. I will pay you back. I promise. We are siblings. I looked out the window at the busy street. I saw a girl walking by in a barista apron, looking tired, probably on her way to a second shift. I thought about the $200 I had to beg for. I thought about the tax lie. We share DNA. Jordan, I said. We don't share a reality. You spent 23 years watching them bleed me dry, and you laughed. You didn't care when I was working double shifts. You didn't care when I had no heat in my room. You only care now because the tap has run dry. I am sorry, he sobbed. I am sorry, okay? Is that what you want to hear? No, I said. I don't want to hear anything. I want you to learn what it costs to live. It costs your pride. It costs your sweat. Welcome to the real world. Jordan, it is expensive. I hung up. I didn't block the number this time. I wanted him to be able to call, and I wanted to be able to not answer. That was the true power. In the months that followed, I built a new life. I hired a financial advisor who actually listened to me. I took the $7 million and invested it in low-risk index funds and sustainable energy startups, sectors my grandfather would have loved. I didn't buy a mansion. I bought the warehouse apartment I was renting. I filled it with books and art supplies. I started writing again, not in secret, not on stolen time, but in the broad daylight of my own living room. The Erickson family continued to crumble. They had to sell the estate. With Mark's reduced salary and Gabrielle's spending habits, they couldn't afford the mortgage and the upkeep. They moved into a smaller condo on the outskirts of the city. I heard through the grapevine that Mark and Gabrielle were sleeping in separate rooms, that their conversations were nothing but blaming matches. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, bound together by mutual resentment and diminishing returns. And me? I was the ghost that haunted them not by being present, but by being absent. My silence was a void they couldn't fill. They couldn't manipulate someone who wasn't there. They couldn't guilt-trip a dial tone. I had taken the one thing they valued more than anything, control, and I had burned it. One evening, 6 months after the party, I walked past a newsstand. There was a society magazine on the rack. The cover featured the top 30 under 30 in Denver. There, in a small sidebar, was a picture of me. It wasn't a glamour shot. It was a candid photo taken of me leaving the shareholder meeting, wearing my navy suit, looking determined. The caption read, "The Quiet Force, How Sabrina Erickson Pivoted from Family Scandal to Corporate Power Player." I bought the magazine. I didn't buy it to gloat. I bought it to remind myself that the girl in the white dress, the girl who had been shoved off a stage, had landed on her feet. I walked home, the cool air biting at my cheeks, and for the first time, I didn't look over my shoulder. The shadows were behind me. Ahead, there was only the lights of the city and the blank page of the rest of my life. The drive back to the house where I spent 13 years of my life felt like driving to a funeral for someone I did not know. I sat in the passenger seat of Officer Reyes's patrol car, watching the familiar suburban landscape roll by, the manicured lawns, the white picket fences, the illusion of perfect American safety. It all looked like a stage set now. I saw the cracks in the pavement. I saw the shadows behind the curtains. It had been 3 weeks since the night of the party, 3 weeks since the hospital, 3 weeks since I became the majority shareholder of Erickson Industries and effectively fired my own father. "You okay?" Officer Reyes asked, glancing at me. "We can make this quick. You just point to what you need, and we grab it. If they say one word you don't like, we leave, or I arrest them. Your choice." "I am okay," I said. My hands were folded in my lap. They were steady. "I just want to get my mother's jewelry and my journals. Then I never have to come back here again." When we pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was the grass, the Erickson lawn. Once the envy of the homeowners association, was overgrown. Weeds were poking through the cracks in the heated driveway. A "for sale" sign was planted crookedly near the mailbox, looking like a tombstone. The house itself seemed to have shrunk. Without the caterers, the lights, and the pretense, it was just a building, a large, expensive, unhappy building. We walked to the front door. I didn't use my key. I didn't have to. Officer Reyes knocked loud and hard, the sound of authority. My father opened the door. Mark looked like he had aged 10 years in 20 days. He was wearing a sweater that had a small coffee stain on the collar, something the old Mark would never have tolerated. He looked at Officer Reyes, then at me. His eyes were dull. There was no anger left in them, only a defeated sort of exhaustion. "Sabrina," he said. His voice was a ghost of its former boom. "I didn't know you were coming today." "My lawyer sent the notification yesterday," I said, stepping past him into the foyer. "We are here to collect my personal effects pursuant to the civil standby order." The house smelled stale. It smelled of dust and old liquor. The hallway was lined with boxes. They were packing. They were downsizing. The grand piano where I used to practice for hours was already gone, likely sold to cover the legal retainers. Gabrielle was in the living room. She was sitting on the sofa, staring at a blank television screen. She was wearing a bathrobe at 2 in the afternoon. When she saw me, she stood up, tightening the belt around her waist. She tried to summon her old smile, but it flickered and died like a faulty light bulb. "Sabrina," she said. She took a step forward, then stopped, when Officer Reyes shifted her stance. We were hoping you would call. There is so much to talk about." "There is nothing to talk about," I said, walking toward the stairs. "I am just here for my things." "We are still family," Gabrielle said. Her voice trembled. It wasn't the scary tremble of rage anymore. It was the desperate tremble of a woman who realizes she has lost her leverage. "You can't just erase us. Sabrina, I raised you. Mark is your father. Doesn't that mean anything?" I stopped with my hand on the banister. I turned around. I looked at the woman who had torn my dress off my body. I looked at the man who had tried to steal my inheritance to buy a sports car. "Family," I said, my voice echoing in the empty room, "does not use violence to keep people in line. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't manipulate. You aren't my family. Gabrielle, you were just my captors, and I have served my time." "Sabrina, please," Mark said, walking into the living room. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "The restraining order. It is killing me. I can't get another executive position with that on my background check. It shows up as a domestic violence flag. If you could just drop it, we could sign a private agreement. I promise we won't contact you, but I need to work. I have bills." I looked at him. This man, who had once threatened to sue me for the cost of raising me, was now begging me to save his career. "You should have thought about your background check before you watched your wife assault me and did nothing," I said. "The restraining order stays. Mark, it stays for the full 5 years. You can tell your future employers that it is a consequence of poor management skills." I went upstairs. My room was exactly as I had left it, except the door had been forced open. The lock I had installed was broken. They had probably searched it the night I left, looking for the notebook or the cash I had hidden. I grabbed a duffel bag I had brought. I moved quickly. I took the silver locket with my mother's picture inside. I took the stack of journals from under the floorboard, the ledger of their debts. I took the photo of my grandfather from the bedside table. I didn't take the clothes. I didn't take the furniture. I didn't take the vacuum cleaner they had given me for my 16th birthday. I left it all. When I came back downstairs, Jordan was standing in the hallway. He looked terrible. He was wearing sweatpants, and his face was unshaven. The golden boy had tarnished. He was holding a cardboard box full of his trophies, soccer trophies, participation awards, the relics of a glory that never really existed. He looked at me, then at the police officer, then at the floor. "I am taking the rest of the trust distribution today," I said, addressing the room at large. Gabrielle's head snapped up. "What? But Marissa said you already took the $7 million. "I did," I said. "I am talking about the remaining assets, the liquid cash that was left in the operating account, about $200,000. "We need that money," Gabrielle said, her voice rising to a screech. "We have to put a deposit on the condo. Mark's severance package is frozen until the audit is done." "I am not keeping it," I said calmly. I pulled a folder out of my bag. I walked over to the coffee table, the same table where Mark had tried to force me to sign the power of attorney. I laid the document down. "This is a deed of gift," I said. "I am establishing the Thomas Erickson Memorial Scholarship. It is a fund specifically for young students who are victims of financial abuse or domestic coercion. It will pay for their tuition, their housing, and their legal fees so they can escape toxic homes." I uncapped my pen. I signed the bottom line. "I am using Grandpa's money to make sure no other girl has to wait until she is 23 to buy her own freedom," I said. Gabrielle stared at the paper. Her face turned a mottled red. "You are giving it away?" she screamed. "You are giving our money to strangers? You are ruining Jordan's future. He needs that money for a fresh start." Jordan doesn't need money, I said, looking at my stepbrother. He needs to learn how to survive without a safety net. It is the best gift I could give him. You spiteful little witch! Gabrielle lunged forward, but Officer Reyes stepped in, her hand resting on her belt. Gabrielle froze. She shrank back, defeated. I am doing what Grandpa wanted, I said. He told me not to let you buy my future, so I am making sure you can't buy anyone else's either. I picked up my bag. I walked to the door. As I passed Jordan, he reached out a hand, as if to stop me, then dropped it. Sabrina, he whispered. I stopped. His voice cracked. He looked at his mother, who was sobbing on the sofa, and his father, who was staring at the wall. He looked at the ruin of his life. I am sorry. It was quiet. It was small. It didn't fix the years of mockery. It didn't fix the time he called me a zero, but it was the first honest thing I had ever heard him say. Goodbye, Jordan, I said. I walked out the door. I walked down the steps. I got into the police car. You good? Officer Reyes asked. I am great, I said. As we drove away, I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look at the for sale sign. I watched the road ahead. 2 hours later, I was in my apartment in the warehouse district. It was small. It was drafty. The view was of a brick wall and a fire escape, but it was mine. Every inch of it was paid for with my name, my signature, my choices. I unpacked the bag. I put my mother's locket in a jewelry box. I put the photo of my grandfather on my desk, right next to my laptop. Then, I opened a garment bag I had picked up from a tailor downtown earlier that morning. I pulled out the white dress. It had been cleaned, but the stains were deep. They had faded to a pale, rusted pink. The strap that Gabrielle had torn was reattached, but the seamstress had used gold thread. She had stitched the rip in the bodice with gold thread, too. It was a Japanese technique called kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold to emphasize the cracks rather than hide them. The dress wasn't pristine anymore. It was scarred. It was beautiful. I hung it on the wall above my desk, like a painting. It wasn't a piece of clothing. It was a battle flag. It was the symbol of the night I stopped being a daughter and started being a person. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on the blank white page, a steady, rhythmic pulse. I thought about revenge. For a long time, I thought revenge meant destroying them. I thought it meant lawsuits and public humiliation and watching them suffer, and a part of me had enjoyed seeing their fall. But as I sat there, in the quiet of my own home, with a cup of tea that I had made exactly the way I liked it, I realized the truth. Real revenge isn't about making them scream. It is about making them irrelevant. It is about building a life so full, so vibrant, and so completely my own that they no longer take up space in my head. The greatest punishment I could inflict on Mark, Gabrielle, and Jordan was to let them be exactly who they were, while I became exactly who I was meant to be. They were the past. I was the future. I typed the title of my book, The Gold Thread. Then I began to write. Chapter 1. The ambulance smelled of antiseptic and rust, but for the first time in my life, I could breathe. I wrote for hours. The sun went down, and the city lights of Denver flickered to life outside my window. I stopped typing and looked out at the skyline. The city was vast and glittering, full of millions of people living millions of lives. I wasn't the girl in the kitchen anymore. I wasn't the ghost. I wasn't the victim. I touched the scar on my forehead. It was fading. I own this life, I whispered to the empty room. And the silence didn't answer back. It just held me, warm and safe and free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please leave a comment down below with your location, and let's share our thoughts on Sabrina's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear these stories of justice and freedom.